The main character's name is Diaz. He is already quite an adult man, dressed in powerful and heavy armor. In his hands, the man held a heavy weapon. He thought that this magnificent plain, which could not be seen with the eyes, was now his personal territory, but this plain was only continuous grass. Once upon a time, the main character's mother told him to be a man who protects the people dear to him. These same words were her last wish. The man's father told him to be a man who protects those weaker than him. In order not to disgrace the honor of the hero's parents who died when he was young, he followed their wishes. With a yearning soul, he left them. When he was 15, a war with neighboring countries began. Following his parents' wishes and to protect those around him, he volunteered. This war lasted for 20 long years. In the fire of war, the man turned 35. At this time, a peace treaty was concluded with the warring country, and the end of the offensive was announced. The moment had come when everyone could rest. The man was even given the title of hero at one point. This was probably due to the man's skills in the war and the records in which he stood out from the others. His Majesty praised him for his victories and what he deserved. He awarded the main character the title of feudal lord, and announced the allocation of his own feudal territory. The man was illiterate, whose only value was in war. He did not understand why all this was given only to him. However, in the end it was explained to him that his purpose would be to protect his lands and people, as well as collect taxes for the kingdom. The first move was to visit his new lands, so Diaz reluctantly packed what he had into a cart and headed towards his new land. He had little time to prepare for the trip before he left the capital, and the official was watching him the entire time. Finally, a voice was heard, and the cart stopped. Diaz thought that they must have finally arrived at his land. The man got out of the leashes and thought that they had reached the center and stopped. The official began to show the boundaries of the territory. Diaz was very surprised. All he sees in front of him is an endless grassy plain, so his territory is mostly plain. The official said that this was a suitable place for someone like the man. He could do what he could now. The man began looking at the papers and said that the plain was called Neutros, and the man was called Diaz. From today on, the man's name is Diaz Neutros. After a while, Diaz went to the stream to drink water. Diaz drank some water and exhaled. He said that fortunately there was a source of clean water here. In the war, he could only get by with dirty and muddy water. He had walked quite a distance and still had not seen a single tree. He decides to try the herb because he wonders if it's a good herb. Not surprisingly, it's just awful. He lies down on the grass and thinks that tomorrow he will think it all over. He needs to find a way to avoid death. He decides to stay here for 2 more days, leave this plane and go away, because he can help someone and then he will be able to fulfill his parents' wishes. Suddenly, someone approached the man and asked him who he was. Diaz was fast asleep, but suddenly the stranger kicked him to wake him up. Diaz wakes up and sees in front of him a young girl who had a long horn right on her forehead. Diaz was surprised to see a human. He did not understand what race he was, and then he saw a horn on her head. The girl repeated, asking Diaz what he was doing here. The man wakes up and says his name is Diaz, and as the girl sees, he slept in this place. The girl asks the man why he sleeps in this place. Diaz replied that he had nowhere else to sleep. The girl asked why the man had come to this plane. Diaz replied that he had been told to live here. The girl asked if the man was really that stupid. Diaz replied that he couldn't deny it, but it was his home now. The girl asked the man what the man's goal was here. Diaz said that if it came down to it, his goal was not to die. The girl started to take out her bow, and then the man shouted, and then asked the girl to wait and stop. The girl replied that if he wanted to live, he had to tell the truth. Diaz replied that he had told the truth. Although if this was not enough for the girl, then his goal is to fulfill the last wishes of his parents, and to help others, to protect those who are weaker than him, and this is his goal in life. The girl asked the man why he was lying. Diaz replied that he had no reason to lie to her. The girl screamed and asked who the man was, a friend or an enemy. Diaz thought he wasn't sure what the girl wanted from him, and whether she really wanted to hear the answer. The man asked if he could answer that he was neither a friend nor an enemy. The girl replied that a man had to choose. Diaz stands up abruptly and shouts that he declares himself the girl's friend and protector. No matter who stands in front of her, he is not her enemy, so he will protect her. Suddenly, the horn on the girl's head begins to glow very brightly. Diaz is surprised, and the girl herself does not understand what this light is and why the horn is engulfed in blue flame. Then the blue flame disappeared. The girl said that it was just a mistake and that it couldn't be. Then she grabbed Diaz's hand and ran with him to the side. The man asked the girl to stop, and then asked where she was running and what she was doing. The girl said that she would take the man to her village, so he should just follow her. Diaz was very surprised that there was a village on this plain. After some time, Diaz and the girl arrive in the village. All the residents were very surprised. They watched the newcomers carefully. Diaz thought about how he followed the girl until the evening. Eventually they reached the village, and he had never seen a village as beautiful as this one. Now the man is being led to the village chief. After some time, the heroes arrive at the chieftain's house. The man said that he sees that Aruna brought a stranger, and now in front of him is the man who caused the blue light. The girl agreed and said that she found the man sleeping, then interrogated him. But he was stubborn and kept asking stupid questions, so she asked the man whether he was a friend or an enemy, and then a blue light appeared. The chief was surprised and asked the girl if the light was really blue without a red tint. The girl agreed and said that it was completely blue. The chief asked if the man could tell what his name meant. The man replied that his name was Diaz. The chief said that it was a name that echoed in the secret. Then he said that Diaz had called himself a friend of Aruna. He asked if Diaz would do the same. Diaz thought that now he knew that this young lady's name was Aruna. Diaz asked that since everyone here was on his land, so of course they would all be friends to him one way or another. The chief asked the man why he thought so. Diaz replied that it was because it was his job. The chief asked Diaz from whose authority he received this job. Diaz replied that he thought from His Majesty the King. In an instant, Aruna takes out an arrow and draws it on her bow, then aims at Diaz to shoot. The man was frightened and immediately raised his hands up. The chief asked Aruna to calm down. There was no need to be so impatient. Then he turned to Diaz and asked the man if he could tell how it happened, from beginning to end. How it happened that the man received such an order. Diaz thought he wasn't quite sure what he meant by from beginning to end, but he told the story of the second half of his life, and how it had played out from when he was little. The chief said that he could see clearly now the reason why the man was glowing blue. He did not expect such a man to exist outside of the owners of the horn. He turns to Diaz and says that he recognizes him as a feudal lord. He will also protect all subjects with all that he can. He wants to hear the man's point of view, and what if they did not recognize them? He asks what their actions will be. Diaz wonders what if the villagers had not become his people. He replies that nothing would happen. The chief replies that they would have been friends, even though they were not his subjects. The man agrees and says that they will share this plain as neighbors. Diaz smiles and says that if necessary they would help each other as neighbors, and he thinks that would make them friends. The chief listens attentively to Diaz's words. Diaz does not understand why the man asks him all these questions. If they are not his subjects, then what are they? Suddenly Diaz realizes that maybe the people in this village are not his subjects. He thinks that it can't be. This is his land, and logically, everything on it is his. The chief asked if Diaz really saw everything clearly now. He was right in his assumption they were not his subjects. He says honestly that they are enemies of King Diaz. They have fought a long war with his country. However, be that as it may, even though they are enemies of his king, for the man they are now just friends. He says that Diaz is a blue, the rarest of blues. With this, he can live peacefully among them. He then tells Diaz to raise his head and asks if he wants to hear his story. The chief's name is Moru, and he is the chief of the Oni people. Their people have long fought with the country of Diaz for power on these plains. One war followed another for 50 long years, which eventually led to their defeat. Suffering great losses, they were driven from the plains. Diaz said the chief said they were driven from the plains 50 years ago, but he wondered how it was that they were still living there. The chief pointed to his horn and said that they can store magical powers in their horns, and with it they can use many magical abilities that ordinary people cannot obtain. One of their magical abilities is fog. They can hide people, houses, and even their presence. Using this power, they returned to the plains and lived hidden from the king. Diaz replies that this is all, of course, surprising, but should he reveal such a truth, since he serves this king? The chief replies that he shares with Diaz because he is blue. He would not say that to another person. There is a magical power called the Judgment of Souls. If there was any trace of enmity in Diaz's soul, it would appear as red. He laughs and asks Diaz if he thinks it's normal for someone his age to adhere to his parents' final wishes. He's lived a long time, but he can't remember ever seeing anyone like Diaz. The man wonders if that's true. The chieftain said they were lucky to have such a fool as the feudal lord of these plains, but there was a limit to how long they could hide themselves. Diaz asks why they are staying here. They could go to some faraway place and live in peace. The chief replies that they cannot leave this place so easily. Their livelihood depends on the cattle called Meimu, which live on these plains, and because of this, it is difficult for them to leave this place. So the man will protect his subjects and become a great feudal lord. If he fails, they don't know who will be the next feudal lord. Diaz asks the man what about his predecessor. The chief agrees and says that he was, but he lived in a completely different place. He was a fool who indulged in bad hobbies. However, he seems to have recently died of illness. He then tells Diaz that he has no shelter or supplies. They will help him, even share their livestock. In exchange, they ask that he say nothing about the village to the residents of the capital. He also specified that he would now be protected by Diaz's silence and that he could also use Aruna. The girl looked at the man. Suddenly, the girl turned to the chief and cried out, asking what he meant. The chief replied that there were many things he must be able to do to live on the plains. She would live with a man. The chieftain says that Aruna brought this stranger to them, so she must take responsibility. Diaz realized that this was his first step as a feudal lord. He had to start living under the same roof with a girl named Aruna. Meimu is a breed of domestic cattle that has 2 horns and is completely covered in soft, fluffy wool. They are not raised for meat, but for their wool. The more grass the Meimu eat, the faster their fur grows. The fur is sheared and then traded back to the village for food and other supplies. Diaz asks if this is true. Aruna shouted at the man if he was really making fun of her. She asked if it was true that he didn't understand what she told the man. Diaz shouted that he understood everything. Meimu, farming, yurts, hunting. Diaz knows there's a lot to remember. Aruna is probably not here by choice, but she's conscientious about teaching him survival skills. As Chief Moru had promised, Meimu was given to him. In order to repay the trust the Oni people had placed in him, he decided, as a feudal lord, to increase the population. He then turned to Aruna and asked if she could give him any advice on how to increase the population. The girl became angry and asked if he wanted anything else. As for the population, they don't count it, so the count remains unknown. Aruna said that the man should stop talking nonsense, because there are more important things, because now they need to worry about supplies. If all he has is just a lot of people, then all they can hope for is hunger, illness, and death. She asks him to answer if he understands this. Diaz said he hoped they would give him more help when they had more people. Aruna yelled at the man not to even dream about it. Diaz replied that he knew it. He apologized to the girl and asked her to forget that even he had mentioned it. He thought he needed to solve the problem of housing and supplies. The girl then takes off the bag and throws it to Diaz. The man asks what it is. The girl replies that it is an earthen matabi. It is made of grass that wild animals love, and if a man scatters it, they will immediately come running. She explains that when a man hunts, he will get not only meat from these animals, but also skins and horns. He must take everything with him to the village and exchange it for supplies, and maybe even a yurt. Hunting like this, he can lay the foundation for the development of his land. Diaz said it was great, and he was pretty good at hunting. He didn't have to think much there. Aruna told the man to keep the wind at his back and walk until he saw a village. If he used it too close to the village, the animals might attack. After a while, Diaz came to a plain and thought that it was time to start. The man takes out a pouch and asks how much he should use. He doesn't remember Aruna telling him exactly how much. He decides not to hesitate and just go for it. The man then tosses the pouch and throws it away. The bag bursts open and a lot of seeds spill out. The man sighs and says that he did it. Now he just needs to wait for the animals to come. He wonders how many animals he needs to exchange for the yurt. He thinks that maybe there is 1 animal or 10. Then for 10 yurts, he needs 100 animals. He thinks that it will take more than a day. Suddenly, the man turns around and sees a huge number of animals rushing straight towards him. Diaz is surprised by their number. He doesn't know where these animals came from on the plain, but if he can get them all, he could achieve his goal at once. Diaz prepares for battle. His tactic is to swing his battle axe with all the strength he has, trusting only his instincts. Not very good, but he is confident in himself. As a newbie, he was taught the basics of sword and bow handling, aiming a little for weak points or gaps in armor. It all sounded too complicated, and he couldn't get used to it at first. Reading the opponent's movement and finding the right line of attack to strike. All this was very difficult for him. He does not want to blame himself for being stupid, but at that moment, the battle axe was an amazing weapon. He no longer had to worry about how to fight. If they had a shield, he had to break through it. If they wore armor, he had to break through it. No matter what they had, they all died the same way. Suddenly, the animals looked at each other and ran away. Diaz realized they were running. He thought about killing half of them. It was easy enough, their movements were predictable. Then he looks around the field and realizes that he has done a lot of damage, because there are quite a lot of animals. He has no idea how he will move them all. At least he can carry one at a time, but he didn't think of it right away, and started swinging the axe like a fool. Aruna will be called a foolish feudal lord again. No one can withstand her cold gaze. After some time, Diaz returns. Aruna meets him and says that the man did quite well. He killed a black buffalo on his first hunt, and it is truly worthy of a man. Diaz looked at the girl questioningly and asked if it was really a black buffalo. He said he killed about half of what came running, but he couldn't catch them, so they ran away. The girl was surprised and asked how many heads the man had killed. Diaz sighed and said about 30 or 40. Aruna screamed that it was a lot, and it was just amazing. The girl said that she saw the man in a new light. The chief added that the man had done a great job and did not even brag about it. Aruna agreed and said that she was telling the truth and that she had never seen such a courageous guy. Aruna ran and said she would tell everyone else and they would move all of Diaz's other black buffalo. She says they would take him. Diaz looked after the girl in surprise. The chief told the man that he was very strong. Hunting 30 black buffalo at once was a truly magnificent display of manhood. Diaz thought for a moment and asked what the chief meant by masculinity. From what he could see, his idea was different from the others. The chief replied that masculinity is masculinity. In a word, it is the value of a man who works hard, a man who is reliable and resourceful. All these and similar traits are combined into one, which is called masculinity. Diaz asked if he really had this masculinity. Aruna's attitude towards him changed for the better. The chief replied that Aruna was considered the most desirable girl in the village. Of course she would be interested in such and such a manhood. Diaz asked the chief to let him know correctly. Would he really be popular with his manhood? The chief asked what answer Diaz wanted to hear. For women, masculinity is a criterion. Diaz asked if there were other features. For example, how handsome he was, or how well he spoke. The chief asked Diaz not to say such nonsense. If you marry a man who lacks masculinity, not only will you starve, but so will your children. Any trait other than masculinity has absolutely no weight for the women of this tribe. Diaz realized that another culture had its own views on common sense and a sense of values. The chief added that if Diaz wanted to marry Aruna, he should prepare a bride price. Diaz asked what that meant. The chief replied that Aruna was beautiful and also a skilled worker, so he expected the price to be high. With all the animals the man had killed that day, he thought it was a good price for Aruna's hand. Diaz asked if he could really marry Aruna. The chief replied that steps had to be taken first to meet individual requirements. Diaz thought the chief was saying that everything would be fine. The only view of marriage was frightening. He knows now is not the time for that. He needs to prioritize, get settled in, and stock up on supplies. The chief said that the man did not need to worry because the Oni people were compatible with many races and were capable of having children. After some time, Diaz was sleeping in his house. He woke up, and when he got out of bed, he saw Aruna. The girl wished the man a good morning and said that she had prepared breakfast. Diaz sat down at the table and then picked up the dish to try it. He said that it looked very appetizing. The girl was embarrassed and asked if it really was. Diaz confirmed that it was very tasty. Aruna then asks Diaz when he plans to hunt today. The man replies that he thought they had everything they needed now, and then asks if there is anything else they need. Aruna replies that if there are more people here, they will need a well and a storehouse and equipment to lift water. They can hire a craftsman from the village, but this will require more goods to bargain with. The man said he would hunt black buffalo. Aruna said that was a bad idea, since the village didn't need them much anymore. She then asked if Diaz had hunted monsters before. She asks, how about hunting monsters? Diaz reflects that there are monsters in all the dark corners of the planet. They emerge unnoticed from the black miasma across the land, or from dungeons and forgotten ruins. They seem to hate life itself, going berserk and attacking everything in sight, leaving only death and destruction in their wake. Their flesh and blood are poisonous and unusable, but their skin, horns, and nails, as well as the demon core located near their heart, have uses in everyday life. Diaz asked the girl if there were monsters in these parts. Aruna replied that there were few of them, but they existed. She could use magic to find them, so if the man took her with him, everything should work out. Diaz replied that hunting was not a walk through the village, so it was dangerous. He asked the girl to simply tell him where to look for them. Aruna replied that if she went with Diaz, it would be like a walk in the village. In the end, Diaz agreed to take the girl with him. He comes out of the house and stretches. Then Diaz turns his attention to the Meimu that were in the enclosure. These Meimu were given by Chief Mo-Ru. The male is named Francois, and the female is named Francis. The man then went to a nearby stream to wash and shave. Suddenly, he noticed villagers who had brought supplies that were exchanged for buffalo. Diaz is trying to figure out what to do since he hasn't finished shaving yet, so he will look unkempt. Suddenly, Aruna's voice is heard, saying that she has finished getting ready. Suddenly, all the villagers were very surprised. Diaz looked at Aruna, who had changed a lot. The man realized that Aruna's makeup was different from usual. The man understood why the girl had changed, because even he could guess. Aruna ran up to Diaz and said that she had asked the boys to look after Mimu. She said that was why they could spend the whole day together. Diaz felt the angry gaze of the boys on him. He realized that they had to go right now and kill all the monsters before something happened to him. Monster spawn area in the northern plains. This area is known to spawn monsters from time to time. Diaz thinks they should have enough goods to build a well and a warehouse after collecting useful parts from 1 or 2 monsters. Aruna asked to leave the search for monsters to her and her magic. She is good not only at home, but also at magic. Diaz asked the girl to start. Aruna smiled, then clenched her hands into a fist and began to chant. A glowing dome appeared around the girl, but she continued to chant. The girl opened her eyes and said that she had found a monster. It seemed to be very big, and there were no other monsters around, so it was probably his fault. Diaz asked if he was really dangerous. She would go to investigate, so Aruna should find a safe place for now. Aruna replied that they would go together because she had camouflage magic. So if the monster was too strong, they could use mist magic and retreat. Diaz thought that the girl was persistent and everything was fine, because Aruna was safe. Then they set off and climb up a mountain of rocks. Suddenly, Aruna gets very scared and looks straight at the monster. Diaz asks if it's really a turtle. Aruna says it's an earth dragon. Why is this monster here? Diaz said that's good. Whoever it is, he starts. He asks Aruna to hide. Aruna asked the girl not to be stupid. It's an earth dragon, because a man can't win. Diaz says that if it gets dangerous, they can run away, but what will they do if he starts chasing them? Suddenly, the earth dragon notices the man. Diaz thinks that he will not allow this. If he aims for the neck or legs, he will hide like a turtle. If that happens, he wonders if his axe can penetrate this shell. Diaz thinks he won't know until he tries. The man attacks the shell and his axe cracks. Diaz realizes it's very tough. He decides to strike at the neck, but the turtle dodges. Diaz continues to make sweeping attacks. Aruna watched this fight closely. Diaz jumps to the side and looks at the coiled monster. Diaz thinks that it is blocking the hole with its shell. The man did not think that the dragon could do that. Aruna, frightened, shouts at Diaz to run away, as it is impossible to kill an earth dragon alone. However, before retreating, he wants to give it his all. The man is sure that Aruna will call him a foolish feudal lord again, but he has no other place to attack. If the first blow does not work, then he must strike twice. If that doesn't work, you have to hit him 3 times. That's how he fights. Until he gets tired, he can do it over and over again. The man hits the monster with an axe, and the axe cracks. Aruna is very surprised, and Diaz thinks that he almost broke it. Diaz holds the hammer close to him and uses the repair skill. Suddenly, the hammer is fixed. Aruna is very surprised. Diaz thought that this might surprise people, because he was also surprised when he first used this skill. He received this battle axe when he was still a rookie in the war. It is his battle trophy from a man of the enemy country whom he defeated. He kept the axe because its design looked cool and was very durable. It repairs minor damage on its own. It's an automatic process, but mentally he can apply the repair again. Diaz says everything is fine and a second round is needed. Much time has passed and Diaz is sweating. He can't break through the shell. When night falls, they will have no choice but to go back. Diaz realizes that he can't even handle the old turtle. Diaz notices Aruna and looks at her, but realizes that something is wrong with her and that she might be cold. Diaz thinks that maybe he should stop. Diaz continues to hit the turtle's shell, and suddenly there are many cracks where the axe was. Aruna is very surprised that the shell has broken through. The turtle noticed that its shell had been breached. The turtle then activated its skill and hit Diaz. Aruna was very afraid for Diaz's safety. At this point, Diaz was able to hit the turtle right in the legs. Diaz realized that he could attack too. The man puts out his axe to defend himself from his attacks. Then suddenly, the turtle hit again. Aruna realized that this earth dragon was emitting magical miasma again. It was reaching the girl, even though she was so far away. She looked at Diaz and said that she didn't understand why Diaz wasn't affected. Diaz at this point thinks that the monster is not attacking at all. He does not complain, but will continue to hit the crack. Suddenly the turtle's head pops out to attack the man. Suddenly it spits out some kind of projectile that heads straight for Diaz. The man thinks he sees that this is the first time someone has broken through this turtle's shell. His attack has become more violent and chaotic. It seems that this earth dragon is furious. If this continues, he will get this loot. Suddenly, the monster's attack rushes straight towards Aruna. The girl flies to the side. Diaz sees the girl's motionless body and screams, calling her. The monster notices this scream and rushes straight to the girl. Aruna looks at the monster in fear. Diaz realizes that the monster has attacked Aruna. It does not want to kill him, but Aruna. Diaz begins to fall into incredible rage. Diaz thinks he made her a promise that he is her friend. No matter how strong the monster is, he will stand and fight. Diaz attacks the monster and breaks through its shell. The man realizes that the monster is no longer moving, so he jumps off of it and runs straight to Aruna. The man asks if he is okay. Suddenly, Aruna pounces on Diaz and starts crying, hugging the man. Suddenly, the girl says that she wants to marry Diaz. Suddenly, voices are heard asking if Aruna and Diaz are okay. They were gone for a long time, so they went to look for them. They then noticed the body of the earth dragon, which shows no signs of life, and next to it were Diaz and Aruna. Diaz realized that Aruna's grip was stronger than a dragon's. He could not break free, no matter how hard he tried. He asked Aruna to calm down and not to cry. Then Diaz and Aruna started to return to the village. The villagers were very surprised when they saw that Master Diaz had defeated the earth dragon. The monster's huge body was being carried on a huge cart. Diaz thought that this turtle was very heavy. Even with all the guys from the village, when they brought him to the village, it was already the next morning. The chief turned to Diaz and said that who would have thought that a man could defeat an earth dragon alone? She is amazed that the magical miasma that was Klouse did not affect them. After processing, most of the materials will be preserved. Their value is great. They have nothing equal to exchange. For a small share, they can process the corpse into materials and also build a well and a warehouse. In addition, they will also build a yurt and a storage for these materials. The man can leave some of the materials from the dragon. Then they can barter with the merchants who come here. It will be useful for the feudal lord to establish good relations with them. Then the chieftain talks about Aruna's wedding gift. If a man gives her anything from a dragon, her parents will be delighted. Diaz asked her to stop and asked what she meant by a wedding gift. The chieftain said she would have the wedding, even if he was against it. She imagines the worries that come with being a dragon slayer next door, and not part of the village. It could turn to mistrust, and mistrust to fear. You can also think about the masculinity they give off after killing the dragon. If he rejects Aruna, then all the girls in the village will try to win his heart by any means. The woman wonders how Diaz will cope with this. Suddenly, Diaz notices a little girl clinging to his leg, and then, looking away, he notices a huge number of girls who were watching the man. The chief said that, for now, the girls are waiting because they know that a man from the kingdom only takes one girl as a wife, and they also think that Aruna is a virgin. Diaz asked if the chief meant that he had no choice but to marry. He was thinking of arranging an engagement. The woman asked about the engagement. She said that they do not have such a custom, and Aruna had already gone to her parents to inform about her marriage. The man only has to decide when to marry or find a compromise that both parties agree to. Thus, the marriage of Diaz and Aruna became official. There was nothing he didn't like about Aruna. She was beautiful and sweet, and also a great housekeeper, and she was gentle with a man. Now that he thought about it, maybe it wasn't a bad idea. He is 35 years old, and it is high time to start thinking about marriage. Then he wonders how old Aruna is. Diaz turns to the man and asks if he knows how old Aruna is. The man says he knows that Aruna turned 15 this year. The man says that Aruna was lucky to have met Diaz when she was of marriageable age. Diaz thought he knew she would be young, but it would be more like father and daughter. By the laws of the kingdom, she had to be 18. It won't be until she's 18, so the engagement should last 3 years. He'll have plenty of time to become a fine feudal lord, and by then he'll be ready for marriage. Then he thinks that he can't just accept this idea. It would be an insult to her feelings. He has to commit himself to this idea, so he will show her his devotion as a feudal lord of this land and as a man. Then a month had passed since Aruna and he were married, or rather engaged. The well had been dug and the warehouse building erected. Now they were enjoying most of the amenities. However, one thing has not changed. The total number of new people in his field is 0. He has ideas on how to increase the number of people, but he is not sure if they will work. He thinks he can consider Aruna as a feudal lord's man, but now she is his family. It would be good if new people would fall from the sky. Suddenly, he hears Aruna screaming, telling Diaz that they are going to have a baby. The jug of water falls right out of Diaz's hands. Diaz asks Aruna if she is sure about it. Aruna says that they will finally have a little baby. Diaz and Aruna shout together the face of victory. After a while, the man was babysitting Frances. He said he didn't think she would get pregnant so quickly. Then Francois came up to the man. Diaz asked him if he was really jealous. Diaz thought that, according to Aruna, the Memu were intelligent and could understand human speech. Using their intelligence, they were able to cope with this harsh world. Even a wild Mimu is able to learn human speech in about a week, which is amazing. This explains how Mimu became domesticated. It was a voluntary decision by Mimu. They were able to get protection from humans and even care and food. With such benefits, they decided to become domesticated. Aruna said it wasn't all good news. No matter how smart they were, Mimus were prone to fear, especially when they got pregnant. There were times when Mimus stopped being afraid. They find comfort in the presence of the strongest member of the herd, in this case Diaz, so they must stay with the male as long as possible to keep their fear at bay, especially at night when they were sleeping. Diaz said he understood everything and he just had to sleep here with them. Aruna said that was not true. Aruna replied that they were moving them to their yurt. Many men did not like this. The yurt could become dirty and smelly, and some found it difficult to relax when Meimu was constantly looking at them. Diaz was surprised that this was all, and then said that it didn't bother him at all. Frances and Francois were their family, and for their baby, this was nothing. Aruna said she was so happy that a man thought so. To think that he had such kindness and masculinity, he was a man after all. To Diaz, the Mimu sounds the same, but Aruna tells him that there are subtle differences in their tone, and Aruna seems to be able to understand them. He does not understand what they are saying. The girl asked Frances what she was saying. Then Aruna said that she and Diaz were not quite husband and wife yet. Then she said that Frances was behaving indecently. Aruna asks what is wrong with spending time together. improving our relationship as a couple. She then says that everything is fine and she does not hold back much. The girl then said that everything was fine and asked Mimu to leave their personal life alone. The man then notices a green glow near the girl's horn. Diaz realizes that he has never seen it before. Aruna is surprised and says that something has disturbed the magical barrier. She notes that someone is approaching in the east, but she does not know who it is. She tries to understand and thinks that it seems to be people on horses, who are about 10 years old. Diaz understands that the green glow near the horn is an invasion, and to the east is the direction of the kingdom. He thinks that someone has decided to visit these plains. If they are bandits, they will be a problem, so he decides to go and check. The man asks Aruna to disguise everything with her magic. The man turns his attention to Mimu and says that he will return soon. There are only 10 of them, and they cannot be stronger than the dragon. Aruna smiled and asked to leave the house to her. The girl told Diaz, but she was counting on him. The man rushes straight towards the intruders. He says that there are 3 of them on horseback and 4 on foot. Aruna says that there are 10 of them, and she also counts the horses. The chances are slim that they are not enemies. If they have bows, they will be a problem, but he will end with one gift. Suddenly, one of the warriors calls Diaz by name. The young man rejoices and says that it was a long time ago. Diaz recognizes the young man as Klouse. He thinks that Klouse was his comrade in arms. He respected him, despite being a commoner, and became a trusted companion to whom he could trust his life. Diaz said he was glad to see Klouse, and then asked him what he was doing there. Klouse replied that he was currently a guide and guard. Klouse says that some nobles have come to him because they have a request for Klouse. Klouse notices the girl and tries to understand who she is. Klouse said that he would be grateful if the man could lead them to his domain, because everyone was tired after the journey. Diaz asked about his property and said that if they meant where he lived, he would take them to his home. Klouse was happy because he would soon see Diaz's own domain. He couldn't wait, because he was already imagining what it would be like. After a while, they come to a flat plain. Diaz thought they had camouflaged everything except the yurt they had built for practice. But he hadn't expected the magic to work so well. It was just incredible. Diaz opens the door and tells the guests not to be shy and to come in. All the guests go into the yurt, where there was nothing. The girl said that it was a great honor for her to meet the hero Diaz. She is the 3rd princess, and her name is Diana. Diana asked if she could ask what kind of tent this was. The man's estate was still being built, and the girl was sure of it. However, she neither saw nor heard the craftsman. Diaz began to speak, but was interrupted by a knight who called Diaz a fool and told him to address Her Royal Highness as Diana. The man ordered Diaz to know his place. Diana ordered the knight to stop. Diaz told Diana that he had no craftsman and nothing that could be called a property. This tent was all he had. It might not be a castle, but he had maimed himself several times building it himself. Everyone was surprised. Diana asked if the man really said he had built it with his own hands. She asked Diaz where his carpenters were. Diaz replied that there were none on such an empty plain. The girl asked if he could not hire some from a nearby village. He simply knew that Diaz had been awarded capital to develop the land, as well as a generous gift befitting his status as a hero by His Royal Highness the King. Diaz replied that he knew about it, but he didn't remember ever receiving a copper coin. He had never received any financial support to build or develop anything here. He hadn't even received any supplies. He thought he would die like a dog on the side of the road, although there is not even a road here. Klouse was beside himself with rage after hearing this. Diaz then asked Diana what brought her here. The girl said that the war calls for the hero again. With the situation in the kingdom now getting tense, she came to seek the hero's help and begs him to lend her his power. Diana replied that she was willing to reward the man with herself or either of the 2 girls behind her, Priscilla or Merida, would become his partner in marriage. Diaz thought about the war and that the girl must be joking. She can't leave Francis now. And he doesn't understand why the girl is talking about marrying a guy she just met. He thinks he already has Aruna and tells Diana that he has plans and will no longer participate in the war. He cannot help them with troops, because as they see, this feudal lord is not able to send even one warrior. Diana gritted her teeth and asked if the man could change his mind. She might even give him an extra reward. Diaz apologizes and says he can't help them no matter what the reward is. If that's all they wanted, the man asks everyone to leave. The knight insulted the man and said that Her Royal Highness the Princess was asking him for help, and he had the audacity to insult the princess by refusing. Klouse tried to stop the man, but he didn't listen and said that Diaz was too arrogant. In an instant, Diaz used his axe and disabled the knight by breaking his sword. Everyone was very surprised, and the sword fragment pierced right next to Klouse, who was standing motionless at that moment. Diaz thought he could feel the man's bloodlust. He posed, hoping to scare him. Diaz puts the axe down and says that this is the end of their conversation, so they should all leave. Klouse approached the knight and said that they had to leave here very quickly. He asked the man not to leak more, or there would be problems. Klouse smiles and says that even all of them together are no match for him, and asks if he really still wants to do it. That is, fight the hero. Diaz was very angry. He thought that he did it and overdid it, so he broke the floor. The man thinks that Aruna will kill him. At that moment, Diana thought that the treasury was empty and there were no troops either. This was not at all what he was told. She called Diaz simply useless. She also cursed him for throwing him away like trash. The girl threatens to make Diaz wait and she will make him regret it. Diaz watched them go and then heard Aruna say that all these women were glowing red. One of the soldiers was glowing blue and the rest were glowing red or white. Then she asked the man if she had scared him. She knew that Francis would cry, and of course she did, and wanted to be near the man. They came under the magic of disguise and saw what was going on there. Diaz hugged Francis and apologized, saying he couldn't stay with her. Then everyone else walked up to the man and he started petting everyone. Then Diaz said that the women who were emitting a red glow meant they were hostile. Does that mean they are a danger to Aruna too? Aruna says that the Soul Court showed her that they are a danger to both of them because they are family. Diaz replies that this is indeed the case. The man thinks that means these three were hostile to him. Now he definitely can't trust the talk about war and marriage, so he did the right thing by sending them away. Aruna said that one soldier was glowing blue, and it was most likely Klouse. Diaz remembered his kind smile and smiled too. Then Aruna says that the floor needs to be fixed. Diaz says that he understands everything. After some time, the floor is fixed, and Diaz wakes up from some movement. The man says good morning to Frances and Francois. Aruna was preparing breakfast. The girl wished the man good morning, and then served breakfast on the table. Suddenly the girl's horn began to glow. Aruna says there is an intruder. There is only one, so he has more details. She says it is a man, and he is in the east. The girl says he seems to be lost because he is walking in circles. Diaz asked if he was really alone because he didn't think he was a traveler. After a while, Diaz was standing outside, and suddenly Aruna came out with Francis and Francois. The man asked if the girl was going to come with him. Aruna replied that there was only one, so there was nothing to worry about. They would hide their presence, so it was okay. And she had no desire to see Francis cry, so even if the man refused, they would go together. Diaz smiles and agrees with the girl. After a while, he walks across the field. Diaz notices a familiar face and asks Klouse if it is him. The young man is very happy when he sees Diaz. Klouse said he tried to find his way back, but he was lost. Diaz said they had no other landmarks except the grass. Diaz said he thought Klouse had returned to the kingdom with the ladies. Diaz then asked Klouse what happened to his gear. Klouse laughed and said that he was thrown out, and also told him to give his armor and sword back. Diaz was very surprised. He asked if it was really his kind, and if it was because he had kicked them out recently. Klouse said that it was not like that, and that was what he wanted too. Klouse then asked if Diaz had heard what they had told him. There was a war brewing in the kingdom again. If war broke out, he would be sent back to the front lines. It wasn't in his future plans, so he took this opportunity to find a friend. He has something he would like to do more than anything else. Diaz asks Klouse what he is so eager to do. Klouse says he wants to work for Diaz, and then asks if he could hire him as a soldier. Diaz thinks that they fought with complete trust in each other. There was no one he trusted as much as Klouse, and he was glad to have Klouse as his ally. Diaz became worried and shook his head. Suddenly, Aruna appears and says that if Diaz is worried about her, then everything is fine. Klouse has been emitting a blue light the entire time he was talking to the man. Klouse is startled by Aruna's sudden appearance. Aruna asks Diaz if he would like to consult with her. She thanks Diaz and smiles, and the man smiles back at her. At this point, Klouse asked Diaz who the lady was and what the sheep were next to her. Diaz said it was a long story. Diaz now had an ally named Klouse, and his number of subjects increased to 1. Sometime in the past, during the war, Klouse begged the captain to wait, and asked if the man really wanted to just leave these people and run away. The man replied that they were simply retreating to gather reinforcements. Klouse turned to the man and said that if they left, then who would fight the enemy, because there were women and children in the nearest shelter. The captain replied that they were in God's hands, and then ran away. Klouse begged him to stop and wait. At the moment, Menu was eating grass and Aruna was cooking, while Diaz and Klouse were building a new yurt for Klouse. Diaz thought he said he didn't mind living in that yurt, but he tore it up, and it wouldn't be right to give him the damaged one, so they built a new one. Then Aruna called them and told the men to go to dinner. Diaz was surprised to see a black buffalo. Everyone sits down at the dinner table. Diaz thanks Aruna for the food and asks Klouse not to yawn. Klouse says that the food is simply delicious, and it is just right for a feudal lord. Klouse told Aruna that she would be a wonderful wife. He asked Diaz if that was true. Diaz answered in the affirmative. Aruna told Klouse to eat more, because they had plenty of food. Klouse thanked the girl. Diaz then approached the girl and asked Aruna about Klouse's equipment. He said that they had dragon parts in stock, so they could use them to make weapons and armor. Aruna said they could do that, or Pather in the village had already started making nekatore. All parts of the dragon are useful, so nothing goes to waste. The fangs and claws are used to make swords, spears, sinew, bowstrings. The shell is used to make shields and the like. Diaz says that if they exchange in the village, they will use more materials. Diaz notices Klouse's face and asks him what's wrong. Klouse asks the man if he really said there was a dragon. Diaz agrees, and then Klouse says he has all the dragon parts, so he killed one. Diaz said it was an earth dragon. He managed to break through the shell and kill it. It couldn't fly or anything and looked like a turtle. Klouse thought it would take a whole squad of knights armed with siege weapons to defeat it. Klouse questions whether Diaz would really waste such valuable materials on someone like him. Diaz responds that he wants to make Klouse the captain of his soldiers once he gets them. If they just lie there, then what's their value? Klouse is surprised, then says that Diaz can count on him. He'll give his life for a man. Klouse then tells Diaz and Aruna that he will protect their land and people, no matter who the enemy is. Diaz asks Klouse to speak less formally. Klouse says that he must show due respect to the man. Diaz thought it was good that Klouse was delighted with the work. After a while, Klouse was practicing with the armor and the new spear. 10 days have passed since then. The spear and armor were made entirely from dragon parts. The equipment is so valuable that Klouse is not sure a nobleman or even a king could afford it. Klouse remembers Diaz and thinks that the man trusts him so much. Klouse hopes that he can live up to the man's expectations. Now the capital is mired in disputes for the throne. Everyone supports their own faction of nobles, building intrigues the same as in the provinces. Far from the eye of the capital, the feudal lords do whatever they want without fear. On the way here, Klouse witnessed the cruelty of the neighboring feudal lord Kasdex. Diaz's reward was probably stolen by the second prince, rumored to have been consumed by greed. The third princess, Diana, rumored to have less military power than political influence, no doubt came to Diaz in the hopes of seducing him and gaining his support. Because of the dispute over the throne, it could develop into waves that would shake this land. That's why he came here. If war comes again, as a soldier, this time Klouse might die. Although, if it's for Diaz, he won't mind. Klouse thinks that maybe he'll have a chance to die with honor. Klouse then notices Diaz, who has taken a gun with him. He approaches the man and asks him what happened. Diaz says that Aruna has detected an intrusion. 12 men, coming from the east. One of them is on the verge of death. He wants to go to them before it's too late. Klouse asks if he should go with the man. Diaz asks Klouse to stay here. If they prove dangerous, Aruna and Meimu will retreat immediately. He wants Klouse to be here to protect them if that happens. Klouse agrees and tells Diaz that he can count on him. Diaz then leaves with Aruna, and the girl covers everything with fog. Klouse thought that it must be Aruna's concealment magic, because they disappeared as if dissolving. He thought that this power was simply amazing. After a while, Klouse notices Diaz and thinks that they came back earlier than he thought, so he doesn't understand what happened. He saw Diaz and Aruna leading some strangers. After some time, Aruna was helping the old people and bringing them food. Diaz thought that it seemed like these old women were abandoned. Because of the crisis, the village had driven them out to reduce the number of hungry mouths. The cause was a rebellion started by the second son of Duke Kasdex. He wants to overthrow his incompetent father and heir. The unrest is still going on in the neighboring territory. The leader of these women is Granny Maya. She used divination to find her way to safety and led the group on the long journey here. Diaz shouted to Klouse that they had done it. Diaz was pleased that in one day he had increased the number of his men by 12. Klouse thought about what he knew he would say. Since they were exiled, he is free to decide what to do with them, but they certainly won't be able to contribute much. Diaz said it was amazing that they were all in their 70s, and Grandma Maya was 90. They live so long, he wonders if they will tell him the secret of their longevity. Klouse asks Diaz if that means they could die any day. That's why they were exiled. Then Diaz picks up the logs and says they need more yurts. Klouse thought about how many years ago the whole village heard that their camp had been taken over by the enemy. Fearing the strategic loss of the village, they had to help them. They can't just leave. Klouse was left alone, so he realized that the enemy was already here, and it turned out that he would die here. Suddenly Diaz showed up, happy to see Klouse. Diaz said everyone was running away, so he thought he was alone. Klouse asked Diaz where he was. Diaz said he heard a baby crying. He went to look and found the boy in his arms. Diaz approached the shelter and asked ordinary people to take the boy. The child cried and asked Diaz not to leave because he was scared. Diaz smiled and asked the boy not to be afraid because he was protecting the boy, so he asked him to just wait for him a little longer. Diaz then closed the shelter and stood up, looking at the soldiers who were angrily rushing towards them. Diaz went to Klouse and asked him not to die. Klouse nervously agreed. Then he doesn't remember what happened after that. With his back to the shelter and standing next to Diaz, he slashed with his sword with all the strength he had. He couldn't tell how much it was. He thought in the fight how useful he was, although he was almost useless. However, he was sure that simply staying in the rear would make it easier for Diaz to kill the enemy. This was the best strategy under the circumstances. When reinforcements finally arrived, the next day, the enemy had already left the village. Klouse realized that Diaz hadn't changed at all. No matter how high he rose in the world, he would be kind, friendly, and honest, just like he always was. Klouse looked at the people and realized that he was a fool. He thought that he deserved to die with dignity. He should live and stay with Diaz. Diaz became a feudal lord and became a great leader. That's why Klouse told Diaz that he would help him, so he shouldn't pull so hard, because he would tear the yurt. A few days have passed since they accepted the old women. Aruna examined their souls and saw that they were all blue, so they had nothing to fear. As more people joined them, they discussed what to name their village. Aruna asks, how about naming it from the village Eluk? It is a traditional name that means first village. Klouse bursts in and says he thinks Dragonslayer Village is a good name. Aruna refuses. Diaz thinks that's how the first village in his territory was founded. Everyone wanted to celebrate, so they threw a small party. It was quiet for her, but when she looked at all those smiling faces, Diaz couldn't help but smile. He must do his best to ensure that there are many more reasons to smile. Aruna approaches the man and asks the man if he has a minute. Aruna says that she wants to talk to the man about population growth. The girl then apologized for disturbing them, but they had to sort this out soon. She asked the man what he thought about what they had talked about earlier. Diaz thought that there had been a conversation the other day about how to attract new settlers, but it was hard to come up with anything worthwhile. There was his plan, but he rejected it immediately. Grandma Maya's plan would probably be the easiest and fastest. Suddenly, Maya came up to Diaz and asked if he really called her. She heard the man calling her. Diaz thought he was sure he hadn't said anything, The woman said she wanted to continue their conversation the night before. The woman asked the man what he had against serving. By selling dragon materials, the man would be able to buy many servants and quickly increase the population. She asked why the man would not do this. Diaz thought it was Grandma Maya's suggestion. A person sold as a commodity is considered a servant. Servants are cheap enough that they can afford to buy them for the village. Diaz said he had a problem with the ministry itself. He had seen many servant soldiers on the battlefield, and it was just awful. In that case, the man could simply treat his servants well. Diaz responded that buying them in the first place was the problem. When servants sell well, the merchants replenish their stock. If they find out he's buying servants, they'll just grab more people. He doesn't believe the merchants have ever treated servants well. Diaz decided that owning and selling servants on her land would be prohibited. Maya replied that she understood and was relieved that the man hated servitude. The woman added that in an attempt to increase the population, someone might have thought to simply buy a few servants. The woman had planned to oppose this, but she was glad it was not necessary. Diaz replied that if that was what was bothering the woman, she could just tell her. Maya agreed and said that the man was right. Maya has heard many stories about Kasdex's servants. She is overwhelmed with emotion, so she apologizes to the man. Diaz replied that the woman should not worry about it here, because it would not happen and he would not allow it. Aruna asked Diaz if he really had something in mind. At this point, Klouse interrupts them, asking if Diaz is really with Aruna. He muffles his apologies and asks the man and girl to take their time. Suddenly, he notices Maya and says he didn't see anything. After a while, Aruna runs up to Diaz and says that she saw a merchant walking along this path. The man agrees and says that they need to go. They are looking forward to some traders, not only to trade goods, but also to spread information about his land and make inquiries. Klouse said he was curious about what kind of trader this was. Diaz agreed and added that he had not seen them before. Then the merchant approaches and Diaz notices a frog instead of a man. He is very surprised. Then the merchant asks if the man is really the dragon slayer he has heard so much about. The merchant says his name is Paijin, and he hopes for a mutually beneficial exchange. Aruna says his race is known as a frog. Everyone is surprised that Paijin is a frogman. Paijin wanted to evaluate the materials and asked Diaz to show him the materials he received from the Earth Dragon, as the man had heard that Diaz had killed him. Aruna analyzed Paijin's soul and said that it was white, which meant that he was not dangerous. His goal was trade, but he had no good intentions either. In that case, Diaz did not understand how to trade with him. Diaz then brings a piece of the dragon's shell. He asks Pagan if there is any problem. Pagan replies that he heard that Diaz defeated a dragon by himself, so he thought this one was small. He apologizes for being rude and asks the man if he really killed the Earth Dragon all by himself. Diaz wonders if Paijin might have assumed he simply found the corpse. He understands that the merchant now suspects him of something, and this is not very good. He turns to Klouse and asks him to put down a piece of shell that is good for dividing, and he will go get his axe. After a while, Diaz returns with an axe. With one swing, he splits the dragon's shell into several pieces. Paige is very surprised, and Klouse shouts that he saw the blow that slays the dragon. Diaz thought that of all the materials collected from the dragon, the shell was the hardest to disassemble. In an attempt to find a way to help the Oni people with their work, he simply went to the shell with his axe. After a few days, he found a way to split a piece of the shell with a single blow. Klouse asked him to call it the Dragon Slayer Strike. Diaz realized that Klouse was terrible at coming up with names. Klouse then turns to Paige and asks him if he believes him. Paige asks the man to let him buy the broken pieces of shell. Then he asks the helpers to unload the cart. He can't pay for it with just coin. Then the cart was unloaded. Paijin says he can afford it one way or another. He's an honest merchant, so he'll figure out the market price for the item. Then Paige asks the assistants to bring someone out too. He can't sell the monsters on Earth, but Mr. Diaz is human, so he might want to buy them. Suddenly, two elven twins emerged from the carriage, holding hands. Their eyes were lifeless. Aruna, Klouse, and Maya's expressions immediately changed, and Paige realized that he had done something wrong. He looked at Diaz's angry face. Diaz looked at the lifeless eyes of the twins, who were probably orphaned like him. He remembered what Paige had said about not being able to sell them. Diaz realized that these twins were a commodity for Paige. Paige was selling them, so the twins were servants. Suddenly, Aruna took Diaz's hand and asked him to calm down. Maya said that Diaz would scare the children with his appearance. The woman turned to Mr. Paige and said that they were very sorry, but they did not want to buy servants. Paige was very surprised and said that they had misunderstood everything and asked for an explanation. He said that these twins were not servants. If he had not taken them as goods, they would have been dead long ago. These two were born as twins in their village. In this village, people condemn twins as children from the belly of an animal, harbingers of disaster. Apparently, they were to be executed the day after birth. However, their parents did not accept this. They took their children and ran away from the village and lived in hiding so that they would never be seen again. Paige met them at that time. However, life in the forest was itself fraught with danger, and in such conditions, both parents became ill. Seeing the rapid progression of the disease and expecting death, they asked Paige to take his children. However, Paige is a traveling merchant. He refused and said that he does not do charity. Then the parents begged him to take the twins as goods. Paige agreed. When they begged on the brink of death, offering him what little money they had, he couldn't refuse. He promised to look after them until they could be sold to someone good. No one cares about cursed children. The money they gave him is gone, so feeding and taking care of them is a loss, and then he runs into Diaz. He didn't mean to hurt anyone, and he's really terribly sorry. Aruna, with the help of her horn, realized that Pagan was not lying, and, moreover, these children had a bright blue tint of soul. Diaz agreed and said that he would take the children. He would give dragon parts to cover Paige's expenses and take care of the children. He asked how that sounded. Paige said that it sounded very good. Diaz thought he was stubborn about buying them, but when he thinks about them having nowhere else to go, that's a different story. And so he will make these twins his subjects, or rather his family. After some time, leaving the plains, Paige was happy and said that Master Diaz was his best client of all time because they had completely sold out and there was nothing better than simple-minded clients. The bear man asked Paige if everything would be okay, since this man could get in the way of the Beast King. Paige replied that there was no problem. A man content with his tiny village in the steppe would never pose a threat. Besides, he didn't suspect anything. He couldn't imagine that Diaz would do anything, cause trouble with these children. There is another reason. If Master Diaz wants to expand his village, sooner or later he will come across the mountains north of the plain. Although there are monsters here, the mountains contain a huge amount of minerals. If he takes over these mountains, his trading partners will make a lot of money. Either he or the Beast King will annex these mountains. Pegeen says that, in any case, as his trusted merchant, he will receive a share of the profits. Eventually, Diaz thought they had placed orders for the next deal, and also sent out recruitment notices for the feudal land. Completed their first deal with Pagan without any problems. Suddenly, Diaz walked up to the twins and picked them up in his arms. He happily asked the girls how old they were. The two were too skinny, so now they would make sure the girls ate right. He said that Aruna cooks very well, so they can eat together. The man introduces himself and then asks the girls their names. He asked the girls if they had a favorite game. If so, they could play it together. The man asked about the girls' favorite food and said he could try to make it for them. He asked about their favorite song or story. Then he asked if the girls liked toys, and then asked again about their names. The girls did not answer. If their parents loved them so much that they left their home for them, then of course these children will also love their parents, which means that they should cherish the names that their parents gave them. The man asks if this means they don't have names. He thinks it means he'll have to name them again. Despite what he looks like, he's got a lot of experience naming children. He asks what names he should give them. Suddenly, the girls got scared and said no, because they didn't want it. Diaz asked the girls if they could tell him their names, because he needed to know. The girls introduced themselves as Sene and Aichen. Aruna was surprised when they spoke. Diaz responded by thanking them for telling him their names, and then said they were very cute. He thinks about how many times he has seen children who lock themselves in a shell and cannot come to their senses. The outcome for such children is almost invariably tragic. It seems that focusing them on the memory of their parents was a good way to break their shells. Diaz says that he and Klouse need to sort out these goods, so while they do that, Aruna and Granny Maya will help them put on their new clothes. He also asks the girls to cook something to eat. The twins agree and then walk along with Aruna and Maya. Aruna asks the girls to follow them, and Maya says that she will feed them steamed potatoes later. Klouse told Diaz that he was surprised. He didn't know that Diaz was good with children. The man said that before the war, he was a kind of foster parent for some orphans. He also looked after a newborn baby. Klouse asked when they gave names. Diaz said there were about 10. When he went to war, he put them with the person who took care of them with him. He hopes they are doing well. Klouse said that maybe someday they will hear about them and come here. After that, he looked at the goods and moved them to the warehouse. After a while, they finish. Aruna, Maya, Sene and Aichin come to Diaz and Klouse. Sene and Aichin were wearing different clothes. Diaz was happy and reached out to the girls, saying that, "Aren't they cute?" Aruna told Diaz to look at himself and wash himself first. Diaz said that the girl was right, and he would go and wash himself now. Then Diaz and Klouse dusted themselves in the stream. After some time, they returned to all the inhabitants. At this time, the girls were braided beautiful hairstyles, which the inhabitants of the plains braid themselves. Aruna said that when the girls grow up, they will be able to do this themselves. At this moment, Maya thought that the twins were not human. However, she felt that their arrival was a good sign. They were very cute, so she would look after them now. Diaz approached the girls and said that Sene and Ayan's new hairstyles suit them very well. The girls showed off their jewelry and said that it was very beautiful. Diaz agreed and thought that it seemed that they had opened up now. Then Aruna called Sinai and Aiken to come to her. The girl gives them jewelry and says that in the ancient language the name Sinai means beautiful as the moon, and the name Aiken means sacred moon. She doesn't know what their parents meant by naming them that, but she is sure that they were closely connected to the moon, and that is why they give them precious stones called Iwa. They are said to contain the power of the moon, so the girls must protect them. Sinai says the meaning of her name, and Aihen says the meaning of her name. They remember their parents and start crying. They remember their words when they said that they loved their girls very much and wished for them only to always be happy. The girls run to Diaz and Aruna, and then fall into their tight embrace. Memu also approaches Diaz. Aruna says that it seems that Memu also wants to help. They say that they are very good at comforting children. The girls see Memu and immediately run to hug them. Diaz called Aruna and said that she mentioned this ancient language when she chose the name of the village. He thought that only the Oni people spoke the ancient language. He asks if it is possible that Sinai and Aishin's parents had some kind of relationship with the Oni people. Aruna says she doesn't know. The old language only exists in legends. She can't say whether anyone outside knows about the language or not. Aruna also says that the girls' parents were not human. Perhaps at some point in the past, their people mixed with the Oni people. Then they notice the girls falling asleep on Memu's fluffy fur. 10 days have passed since then. It seems that Sene and Aihen still carry the grief of losing their parents, but nevertheless they have taken the first step in overcoming it, and their smiles light up the village, and their happy voices echo. Everyone in the village began to think of them as their own children. Suddenly the girls felt something and began to look at Memu. Aruna told Diaz that someone was approaching and coming from the east, a man on horseback. Aruna says that at this rate, he will be here soon. Diaz says that it is from the east again. He decides to go and greet them. The man calls Aruna, Francis, Francois. Memu started talking to someone. Aruna said that they are saying that this time they will stay here. They do not like being away from Diaz, but now that Sinai and Aichen are here, they want to stay with them. Diaz said he understood, and they would be back soon, so he was counting on them. Suddenly the girls approached the man. Sene told Diaz to come home as soon as possible, and Aichen added that they would wait for him. Diaz smiled and agreed. After some time, Diaz stood on the plain and waited for the approaching man. Aruna hid with magic in the fog. Then the girl warned Diaz that the man had arrived here. She looked at the old man and said that his soul was white and there was no hostility. The man reaches Diaz and then dismounts from his horse and says he apologizes for coming unannounced. He calls Diaz his master and guesses who he is. Diaz asked the man who he was. The man said his name was Camelot, and he came as a representative of Duke Kasdex. Lord Eldan Kasdex wishes to meet Lord Diaz, and he is already on his way. If he wishes, he can bring him to his home. Diaz said they will meet here. The man looks up and sees Diaz's hostile gaze. He bows and says that he will pass on Diaz's message to his lord. Diaz thought that Eldan Kasdex must be the womanizer who started the civil war. He couldn't let such a man get to Eluk village. After some time, they saw a big cart. Aruna didn't understand what it was. She said that the man with the big belly had a bright blue soul, and the people around him were mixed, but there was no red one. Diaz was surprised and asked the girl why he had a blue aura. Aruna said that he had a stronger normal blue than she had ever seen, except for Diaz. The man then got off the cart and apologized, saying he was terribly sorry, but he just had to see Diaz. The man said his name was Eldan Kasdex, but Diaz could just call him Eldan. He had heard stories about the legendary hero Diaz, which is why he admired the man so much. He said that was why he wanted to meet him and get to know him. He would not do anything to offend him, so he asked Diaz not to be angry. Diaz told Eldan that he was not mad, but he had to apologize for being so rude to his man. Eldan said that there was no need for formalities with them. He said that it was a pleasure just to get to know Diaz. Then Eldan asks who is that girl on the side. Aruna is very scared. Eldan said that she hides very well, but he has excellent ears and nose, so he noticed her, and she also has the same good smell as Diaz. Diaz was surprised that Eldan had revealed Aruna's illusion. Aruna makes a decision and appears. Eldan looks at the girl and asks who she is, what race she is, and what her relationship is with Diaz. Diaz says the girl's name is Aruna, and they are engaged. Aruna says she is his wife. Diaz agrees. Eldan asks Aruna if she is an Ajin. The girl says that she is an Oni who is born with this horn. She has never heard the term Ajin, so she does not know how to answer this. Eldan says that the Ajin are people similar to humans, except for humans themselves. Beastmen, mermaids, they are all Ajin. Aruna asked if that was true. In that case, she could be called an Ajin. Suddenly, Eldan began to cry. Eldan then throws himself into Diaz's arms and asks if he has a child with Aruna. Diaz asks the man why he is crying and then says that they do not have children. Aruna said she wanted to have 10 children. Diaz also took in 2 orphans, whom she thinks Eldan would call Ajin. Eldan shouted that Diaz had an Ajin wife and Ajin children. He called Diaz his soulmate. Suddenly, Eldan's ears grew bigger, and he also grew a trunk. Eldan lifted Diaz with his trunk. Aruna and Diaz were surprised, saying that this couldn't be, and that Eldan was an Ajin. When Eldan was still a child, in order to show the will to fight and attract more volunteers to the royal capital, stories about heroes were told, but stories of heroism turned into a theatrical play. This was the first time he heard about it. The hero Diaz fulfilled his parents' last request, to defeat the strong and protect the weak. He made the nobles change with his fist. There was such a story. The nobles found this problematic, so public performances began to be closed after a week, then banned altogether. This caused public indignation. Tablets with stories that were the subject of these speeches were distributed from person to person. They even reached the territory of Kasdex, separated from the capital. The problem with the story he heard was that most of it was fabricated, and there was no mention of a noble on the battlefield. Eldan said that, of course, he wasn't going to take the story at face value, but people like the veterans, the merchants who traded on the battlefield, the home tutors, everyone who met Diaz on the battlefield had nothing but words of praise. That's why he started admiring Diaz. Suddenly, Eldan was asked not to overexert himself too much. Diaz thought that Eldan had lifted him like a chest, so of course his physical condition would deteriorate and he would be tired. They all worked hard together to find him. Diaz asked if Eldan really couldn't move. The man said that Eldan was a half-Ajin, born from the union of a human and an Ajin. These are special creatures, endowed with the rare ability to transform into an Ajin. His father is a former feudal lord, Kasdex Enkas. His mother is a slave from the elephant race, named Neha. When his body changes, he loses a lot of strength. Earlier, Diaz thought that he changed shape out of happiness. Being half Ajin is one of Eldan's strengths, but being half human can also cause various problems. The man said that Eldan has the small stature of an elephant race, but for a human, he has a strong build. His unstable physical condition can only be supported by the care he receives from his wives. Then there's Camelot. The way the Ajin are treated in the land of Kasdex is beyond description, and Eldan's awareness of this situation, his heart screams. If there were no walls between the races, then everyone would live in harmony, so Eldan wanted to build such a society. Then the feudal lord's son began to use his social status to protect the Ajin from behind the scenes. The rumor that Diaz heard that Eldan loved women was also probably a fabrication to hide the truth. Aruna said there was one thing she wanted to ask. She asked why Enkas hadn't enslaved Eldan like the other Ajin. Even if he had been his child, a half-Ajin child was still an Ajin. She asked what Enkas wanted to enslave all the Ajin. Camelot said it was true that Eldan would be treated as a servant, like Neha. However, Enkas's wife was a woman named Jania. The two already had an older son named Jania. This boy resembled Enkas, and like him, he had a lousy character due to his ugly appearance. Enkas did not think much of Johnny, who looked like him, so when the handsome Eldan was born in human form, he was very interested. He declared that Eldan was definitely his child, in order to gain political power. Diaz realized that this was a funny, disgusting story. He hated the child who looked like him, and preferred the child who didn't. And the fact that he couldn't feel love at all was terrifying. Eldan's identity as an Ajin was hidden from himself and those around him. Neha remained by his side and looked after him as a servant. However, when he was 5 years old, his nose and ears changed shape. At that moment, Eldan realized that Neha was his mother. From then on, their relationship deepened. Eldan's goal was to establish a bond between mother and child. Diaz said he had heard there was talk of a civil war, but was there really a crisis going on? Camelot said Eldan just wanted to protect the people he cared about. Jania and her men reported Eldan and Enkas's true intentions. Enkas, in a rage, declared that Eldan, Neha, and all other Ajin must die. And it was for this reason that Eldan decided to fight Enkas and his men. After a bitter war, Eldan defeated Enkas and his men. Although an imposter, he declared himself a feudal lord of the Kasdex domain. Eldan asked Diaz for forgiveness. He said that Diaz was a man who had married an Ajin, whom he had recently met. Since he had married an Ajin, his children would also be Ajin. Aruna has a very happy life. He is sure that her children will also be happy. When he first saw Aruna, he was initially mistaken. He thought that she was a kindred spirit and shared the same dream. Diaz said that he also approves of Eldan's dream. In his village, humans and Ajin already live in peace. He thinks it would be great if this scene could spread further. That's why he will support them and cooperate as much as he can. He told Eldan that his dream is truly lofty. The man beats his chest and tells Eldan to hold his head up high. He asks Eldan if he thinks it's good to be brave. Eldan pulls himself together and stops crying. After a while, Diaz and Eldan were talking about a variety of topics. The conversation turned to food supplies on each other's territory. Eldan approached Diaz and said that if the men were unable to store more food, he thought there would be a problem. If his village's population was still growing, then unless he improved food production, their food would not be enough. Winter would come sooner or later, so it would be bad if they didn't start preparing immediately. Diaz thought that was what he had advised them. Eldan's words as a leader and feudal lord were a reason for urgency. He decides that for now they will try to make a field for sowing. He was a farmer before the war, so he will show everyone everything he can do. He needs to create 1 or 2 perfect fields for harvesting. Then Diaz and Aruna return home, where Memu, Sanai, and Aiken are waiting for them. The girls saw Diaz and started screaming that the man promised to return immediately, but in the end he deceived them. The man said it was true, but he had reasons for coming back late, but whatever he said would sound like an excuse. Then Sanai and Ahan were already asleep in their bed. Aruna said that they were finally asleep. The girls had been playing for so long, so she didn't understand where they got all that energy from. Diaz thought that these children were just running around an awful lot. Until now, he thought that this peaceful village was a lie. One day, Ayan screamed that Sanai ate her potatoes, and Sanai cried that Ahan did not forgive her. Diaz tried to calm them down. He offered to give up his potatoes so the girls could make peace, but Aiken said she didn't want to eat Diaz's potatoes. Diaz thought their sister rivalry was too strong. There were many incidents of crying, night incidents, and the next morning even Aruna was surprised. The girls also suddenly developed a high fever. Aruna looked after the girls all night. Suddenly Senai started crying and calling for her mother. Aruna cried back. Diaz thought that those days that continued to be hard, they would take care of the girls. When they overcame these incidents, Senai and Ahan's attitude became better, and smiles appeared on their faces again. Suddenly, Aruna turned to Diaz and asked if it wouldn't be better if they scolded the girls just once. Diaz said he didn't think so. They would be the ones to break their own promise. They should apologize, not scold. And besides, for children who have just started a family, they want to run around and check on adults. All these are good things to try. He thinks they should embrace it. However, the girl knows that this can have a bad effect on them. From tomorrow on, they will start scolding them correctly. Suddenly, Aruna felt an intrusion. She said that there were many people, and they were coming from the southeast. Diaz asked if the girl was sure that these were Eldan's non-humans. The girl said that Eldan had already gone home. He also went in another direction, and at this hour, as a rule, guys from dark companies wander around. So most likely, thieves or bandits. Diaz said that even if it was night, he would still go and see. He asked Aruna to stay and guard everyone, but the girl said that she would go too. Aruna said it was a new moon. If Diaz had no one to rely on, he wouldn't be able to find them in the grass. Her magic should be enough if Klouse kept an eye on the house. Klouse suddenly woke up and felt someone calling his name. Diaz said he understood, and then told Aruna to come with him and give him her power. The mercenary reflected on how wealthy members of the Oni race had many Mew heads, and they can live off the income from them. He understood that those who go hunting are poor people who lack wealth, and before getting married, men collect payment for a woman. The man also knew that the fastest and easiest way to get rich was to hunt bandits, but bandits rarely appear around these places. The mercenary thinks it's strange to go to so much trouble for a land that has nothing but grass on it. He assumed that these people had a purpose. The man turns around and asks if there are really people in this place. He says there aren't even any trees nearby. A guy with blonde hair comes up to a man and tells him to stop talking. The guy claims that he paid a lot of money to hire mercenaries. He says that if they don't stop talking about unnecessary things, they will have to return the money. The man raises his hands and says he understands. The man states that they will do everything in the best possible way. He asks if there is a reason why they should do this at night. The guy asks if the mercenaries know about the hero Diaz. He tells them that Diaz is the type of enemy who can fight on the front lines in broad daylight and win. The guy thinks that Diaz might attack them unexpectedly. The mercenary makes a face. The guy says nothing. He just demands that the mercenaries deal with a guy named Eldan. He was informed that this guy is in the meadows to meet with Diaz. The mercenary asks if there will be a fee for him. The guy says that he will pay 100 silver coins for Eldan and 10 gold coins for Diaz. The mercenary looks at the guy in amazement. Then he picks up the torch and commands his men to follow him, saying that Diaz will be their biggest catch in a long time. The man suggests to his men to end all this and return to the city with huge bags of coins. The mercenary peers into the darkness. The man notices a light coming towards them. The mercenary didn't understand why a red color appeared in the darkness. Suddenly, an arrow flies into the shoulder of one of the mercenaries. He screams from the unexpected and sharp pain. The man is cursing because the arrow hit Lyle. He is not happy that his surprise attack was discovered. The man points forward and says that the arrows are in the area of the red light. The mercenary leader shouts at his men to throw away their torches and start shooting their bows. He points to a red light. The red light continues to move. The man gets into a fighting stance as he notices that the red light has disappeared. Suddenly, one of the mercenaries is shot in the leg with an arrow. He screams in pain. The leader of the mercenaries asks where the attack is coming from. The mercenary leader was amazed at the skill of their opponent. He could not understand how their opponent knew their location. The mercenary leader thought that it would be an easy victory. He did not want to admit that they had taken on an impossible task. The man then shouts at his men to start attacking as well. He demands that they make sure where their target is. All the mercenaries start shooting. The leader of the mercenaries says that if they find out where their enemy is, then they can win. The mercenaries heard a voice ahead. The leader of the mercenaries smiled. He points his sword forward and shouts for his men not to miss the opportunity to capture the enemy. One of the mercenaries asked where their opponent was. A second later, all the mercenaries received a strong blow and scattered across the field. The mercenary leader stopped. He could only hear the screams of his men. He couldn't understand how all his men had been defeated at once. He guessed that there was something more terrible there. The mercenary leader shouts for his men to remain vigilant. He says that they have several other enemies besides the archers. The mercenary leader says that they have more men on their side. He demands that his men form a battle formation and wait. His subordinates did so. But they too were dealt a heavy blow and scattered across the field. The leader of the mercenaries noticed a green light in the darkness. He tried to understand what was happening. Then he assumed that it was Ajin. The man began to curse and demand that the monster show itself. A huge dark figure appears right in front of the mercenary. The man manages to put his blade forward and block the blow. Sparks flew during the strike. The leader stared into the eyes of his opponent to see who was in front of him. He realized that it was Diaz. When I saw his blue eyes, heavy armor, and two-handed axe. Diaz kicked the man. The mercenary leader started cursing again. At that moment, he thought that Diaz was worth more than 100 gold coins. At this time, the guy who ordered Diaz was running through the forest, trying to hide. He could not believe that the mercenaries were defeated so easily. He was panicking because he could be noticed. The boy ran to the tree and disappeared behind it. Suddenly, he felt something strange and fell to the ground, screaming and cursing. The boy was angry. He blamed Diaz for everything. He wondered why Diaz hadn't dealt with him right away. He couldn't honor Diaz. The boy swore he would deal with him one day. Diaz wanted to tell the torchmen that they were now on the offensive, but they continued to attack mindlessly, so the battle ended. While this was happening, an enemy arrow scratched Aruna's face and the wound began to bleed, so Diaz became angry. In the end, they did not receive any new wounds. The bandits were wounded, and some were left with serious injuries. Diaz was upset that one of the bandits had escaped, but the man did not think he was worth pursuing. Diaz and his lieutenants confiscated the bandits' weapons. Diaz lectured them on how stupid the bandits' actions were, no matter how they saw it, before deporting them from the plains. Aruna asked if deportation would be too light a punishment. She was unhappy, but Diaz thought it was okay, since they had no victims. Diaz promised to show no mercy to the bandits if they tried to do anything on their territory again. Aruna said that hunting bandits was a good job. She thought that it could earn a lot of money quickly. The girl said that they could get money from the village chief. She also suggested exchanging the confiscated weapons for money. Diaz wondered if they could get money for the worn-out weapons. Diaz knew that iron was a valuable material on the plains. Aruna said that in addition to being valuable as weapons, they could be smelted into tools. That was why she insisted that they sell everything they got. Aruna couldn't say that her parents were well off, so her dream was to hunt bandits. Diaz looked at the girl and remembered that before meeting him, Aruna made her living by patrolling the plains and hunting. Diaz remembered that hunting bandits would be the fastest and easiest way to make money. Diaz also knew that bandits were rare on these grassy plains, so it was difficult to catch a large number of bandits. Suddenly, Aruna's horn began to glow. The girl remembers that when she felt Diaz approaching them on a horse-drawn carriage, her heart began to beat faster. Then the girl thought that bandits would finally appear. But she immediately saw that Diaz was not a bandit. Diaz learned that Aruna was able to sense his movements. The girl then thought that Diaz was just a refugee who was thrown out by their crew. She thought that the man would not survive. Then the next day, the girl went to check on Diaz while on patrol. Diaz was lying on the ground with his eyes closed. Then Aruna couldn't say anything, looking at the man sleeping so carefree. As a precaution, she decided to judge the soul. The girl thought that if the result was blue, then it would be a huge loss. Aruna says that if Diaz was a bandit, she would not have spared him, taking his goods and armor. Diaz was amazed by the fact that Aruna decided to wake him up and talk to him. The girl at that moment felt that they should talk. The girl did not understand why she did it. Diaz ended up with Aruna, and he doesn't think his choice was wrong, although he admits that there are times when they don't understand each other. Diaz watched Aruna as she looked into the distance. Aruna turned around and blushed, asking him why she wanted to enter into a relationship with him. Diaz turned to Aruna and asked what had happened. He did not understand anything. At that moment, the girl came up to him and kissed him on the cheek. Diaz looked at the girl in surprise. Aruna looked back at him in embarrassment. Then Aruna retreated and walked in the opposite direction from Diaz. The man called out to Aruna. The girl became embarrassed and ran forward. Diaz sighed and ran after the girl. He asked the girl to wait for him so that she would not leave him behind. He was going to run after her no matter how dark the night path was. He believed that Aruna would show him the way. Diaz sat in the carriage with Eldan. Eldan said that increasing the population of the territory is not easy. He believed that they should ensure a large supply of food and other materials. Eldan says that if something happens, there will be a shortage right away, and things will get hard for them. Eldan claimed that winter will come soon, and they should prepare. Diaz agreed that they had to avoid more than just a situation like starvation. Diaz realized that the fact that the population was starving meant that Aruna and the children would be starving in a similar situation. Diaz confidently says that for everyone's sake he will hunt even more and prepare a lot of dried meat. Eldan claims that such a monotonous diet will cause harm to health. He says that they also need to stock up on grain and, if possible, vegetables. Diaz thinks about plowing the meadow. He asks if they should start cultivating the fields. Eldan asks if Diaz really plans to cultivate the fields. He thinks that it will be difficult for them on these lands. Eldan tells that many people have tried to clear these lands for arable farming, but they have failed, since only grass can grow on such soil. Diaz says that despite this, he will try as long as it takes. He says that they should try to find out. Eldan says he understands everything. He promises that he will support him with all his might, helping Diaz to succeed. Diaz wakes up and opens his eyes. He quietly leaves the tent so as not to wake the sleeping girls and stretches. Diaz approaches the well where Aruna was standing. He greeted Aruna. The girl blushed and greeted the man in return. The old women standing near her smiled and said that Aruna was in a good mood. They asked if anything happy had happened last night. Klouse runs up to Diaz and tells him that he encountered an unusual type of beast during his morning patrol. Klouse shows a bat. He tells how they were climbing in a flock, and one of them attacked him. He was forced to shoot it down, and the rest of the flock flew away. Diaz says they are bats. He has never seen anything like them. Klouse says he has never seen anything like them either. Diaz says they need to be careful. Klouse listens to Diaz. Diaz notes that the day is quite clear. Their community decided to have breakfast outside. Diaz talked to everyone during the meal and asked if anyone had any needs or health problems. They answered that no one had any particular problems. The Mayan grandmothers said that they were healthier and more energetic than before. Diaz suggested that it was due to Aruna's medicinal herbs. They were taken daily. They ate them and purified themselves in a medicinal bath. Thanks to this, their health improved. Diaz thought about the huge amount of food consumed in the village of Eluk. Therefore, in a village or tribe, they are used even more often. Diaz turns to Aruna and asks where she gets so many medicinal herbs from. The girl answers that she collects them in the surrounding area and acquires them through deals with traders, but she mainly increases the quantity by growing. Diaz asks if this means that in the village, the tribe has fields of medicinal herbs. Aruna talks about how they grow plants in pots so they can be transported. She states that they don't know when they will have to leave the land, so they can't maintain the fields. Diaz says he wants to cultivate the fields in the meadow. He says that if they can harvest, they will live more peacefully. The man asks if he is right. Diaz says that if the girl can, he would like her to teach him the method of growing medicinal herbs in pots. Diaz thinks that the girl will be able to make a good manual for cultivating the field. Aruna apologizes and says that she does not know much information about this method. Aruna says that if the man wants to know more, he should ask the chief. Diaz goes to the chief of the Oni tribe, Shader Mogu. The chief says that it is impossible to cultivate fields in this place. Shader does not know why no crops grow in these meadows. Shader says that in the past, the ancestors cultivated the fields in a special way, but during the war, the method was lost. Diaz says Shader could tell him about growing medicinal herbs. He claims he still wants to try it. Shader says there is not much to tell. He claims that there is nothing complicated about it. Shader hands over a leaf fertilizer stone and says that if you use it, everything will work out well. The tin tells about the process of making medicinal herbs and seeds. Diaz looks at the stones and realizes that he cannot say whether it is a difference in culture or values. The chief says that the stone-cultivated field is completely useless. He tells how when they tried to grow potatoes and beans in pots, they grew until they had leaves, and then dried up and became infertile. The chapter suggests that the forest dwellers know something. Diaz asks about the forest dwellers. The head says that forest dwellers know about fields, plants, and forests. He has heard that if a forest dweller waves his hand, any wasteland will become a land overflowing with greenery. But he has never seen anything like this. The chief says that they will cooperate as much as possible to cultivate the fields. He asks Diaz to tell them the secret of the method if they succeed. He says that cultivating the fields in this field is a dream for them. Diaz strokes the lamb and smiles. He says he doesn't mind telling the secret. The man says he planned to tell everyone about the method all along. He also promises to bring a mountain of potatoes. The chief smiles and says that he expected something like this from Diaz Blue. He says that they will all hope for his success. The chief then says that they will be expecting the birth of Aruna and Diaz's child. He says that he will give the necessary medicinal herbs. Diaz asks if it is necessary. The leader says it is a very valuable thing. He says he will give Aruna the medicine. The leader begins to convince Diaz that this is a necessary thing, since Diaz considers this thing suspicious. Diaz returns to Klouse. The guy meets Diaz. Then the girls notice them and immediately run up. They are happy that Diaz has returned much earlier. They greeted him. Diaz happily announces that he is now home. He lowers himself down in front of the girls. They notice the bag in the man's hands and ask what is in it. The man opens the bag and shows that there are precious stones inside. He asks if the stones are beautiful. The girls look at the stones unimpressed. The girls say there is nothing special about them. They were bored. They say they don't need something like that. There were rams standing next to the girls. They looked at each other. Then the girls ran to play with the rams. Aruna meets Diaz. She asks what kind of stones the man brought. Diaz was surprised by this reaction, as he thought the stones were beautiful. Aruna says that if you look closely, you can see that these stones have no magical power. Then she remembers that the man does not feel the magical power. The girl knew that whether a stone has magical power or has a vessel for accumulating magical power, if a person is engaged in magic, he will be able to feel it just by looking. The girl remembered that the stones look like precious stones, but since they do not have magical power, one can say that they are just simple stones. Diaz is amazed by Aruna's knowledge. He wonders if Senai and Aichin can tell the difference between stones. Aruna says that both girls are very good for their age. Sometimes she feels a little magical power. The girl says that if Senai and Aichin are trained, they could one day become magicians stronger than the leader. Diaz looks at the girls with a smile and thinks that they have amazing talent. The man was thinking at that moment that no matter what way of life these children would choose, he was sure that their future would undoubtedly be bright. He believed that they would one day become great magicians. Suddenly the girls screamed that someone was approaching them. They shouted for everyone to get ready to defend themselves. A flock of bats flies towards the tribe. Diaz takes out his gun and tells Aruna and the children to hide in the yurt. They run forward with Klouse. Klouse thought that the morning bats had come to avenge their brother. He thought that the targets were too small, and there were too many of them. He understood that it was ineffective to fight with an axe and a spear. Diaz attacked the bats. Klouse helped him. For a long time they swung their weapons to kill all the bats. One of the bats flew up to Diaz and grabbed the axe with its mouth. Diaz realized that this was the leader of the pack. Klouse ran up to Diaz and punched the pack boss. They then continued to deal with the bats. The bats were very agile. Klouse and Aruna shouted at Diaz not to give up. The man swung his axe decisively and struck the pack boss. Aruna explained that the monsters are sensitive to sound, which is why they are called Mekakushi bots. She says that they need to amplify their voice to defeat them. Diaz smiles and says that Aruna saved them. He thanks the girl. He says the scream was so startling that it scared him. Aruna apologizes and says that the larger ones rarely come close, so she was careless. Diaz asks about the monsters. The girl is silent and looks at the man. Diaz smiles, then apologizes and says that his ears are still hard of hearing. Aruna smiles and comes closer to Diaz. She whispers something in his ear. Diaz looks at the girl in surprise. While the man tried to call Aruna and ask her to repeat, Klouse was lying on the ground, having lost consciousness. Diaz crushed the stones. He puts his hand into the bowl and checks if he succeeded in crushing the stones. The man leans back and is glad that he has finally finished. 5 days after he started grinding the stones of the fertilizer leaves given to him by the chief of the tribe, he has finally finished grinding all the stones. Diaz knows that now they can begin to cultivate the field. Diaz knew that, first of all, he had to clear the meadow and plow the land. Aruna called out to the man. Diaz turned around. The girl said that someone was approaching them from the east. Diaz and Aruna were moving towards the approaching guests. Diaz thought about the reaction that Aruna felt. The girl felt many people with horses. She also said that something was approaching them that was neither a person nor a horse. Diaz was going to go and check, but Aruna said she wouldn't let Diaz go alone until she found out who was approaching them. Diaz thought that he would feel better if Aruna went with him. Aruna shouts that soon it should be possible to see who is approaching them. The man takes out his binoculars and looks through them. His eyes widen as he recognizes Camelos. The man turns to Aruna and tells her that Eldan's servant is approaching them. The girl asks the man not to exaggerate if he knows him. Then Diaz tries to see what is behind him. He sees white animals. The man realizes that they are buffalo. He sees many attendants and luggage. He assumes that this was a strange reaction. Diaz recognizes the white animal, which looks like a black buffalo. He thinks it is a good name that can be easily remembered. Aruna looks closely at the carts, and then she says that in the second cart she saw a small moving shadow in the luggage. She assumes that this creature is watching the situation outside. Diaz looks at the girl questioningly. He wonders what it could be. He decided to try asking what is in Camelos's cargo. At this time, small mice were jumping around in the cart. The mouse with glasses was thinking about what happened when they were caught hunting. They were able to get into the cart, going to the desert. The mice thought that somehow they could return to their native places. A mouse with glasses decided to take some beans. Another mouse decided to ask what she was doing, which scared her very much. The mouse with glasses says that she has decided to take some food. The second mouse tells her that it will only get in the way. The mouse with glasses asks hesitantly how they will manage without food on the long journey. They do not know when they will be able to get off the cart and get food. She assures the other mouse that they must be well prepared. Mouse asks if Ima really hasn't noticed yet that the wagon is heading west instead of into the desert to the south. She says that Ima has some intelligence, so one could guess that their real goal is to deal with Diaz. Mouse says that they will deal with Diaz and show their strength, and also bring back the honor and pride of the desert people. Ima doesn't believe it. She lent everyone her intelligence in order to return to the desert. She cooperated because she was ordered to come up with a plan to infiltrate a wagon heading to the desert. Ima says that their opponent was able to defeat the dragon, which means that he is stronger than the dragon. She convinces everyone that they cannot defeat Diaz. All the mice started to discuss how they were a desert people and a strong clan. They all started to speak negatively about the human race, thinking that defeating Diaz would be the right thing to do. The mice convince Ima that they are of higher rank. They remember the man who told them to return to the desert with food. The cart is stopped, and Ima falls because of it. Diaz approaches the cart. He is immediately greeted and thanked for coming out to meet them. Camelos says that the goods Eldan promised have been delivered. All the mice become angry. Diaz is at this time happy that Camelos has arrived. He apologizes for the rush and says that he wanted to ask something. One of the mice wants to jump out of the cart. Ima tries to stop it and says that this is an opponent they cannot defeat. Ima pushes the mouse away and falls. Diaz hears a strange sound from the luggage. He asks if there is something there. Suddenly, mice jump out of the cart and are about to attack Diaz, thinking that he is defenseless. Diaz is surprised that the mice can talk. Aruna takes out her weapon and scares away all the mice. Diaz looks at the girl in surprise. She says that the man is too careless. He asks if the girl is talking about skill. Aruna says that they cannot decide on their own, since it may be Camelos's property. The mice begin to attack Diaz again, speaking negatively about Aruna. The man thrusts his axe forward and says that Aruna is a wonderful girl. He says that he will not forgive the insult. Aruna blushes. Camelos asks why there are mice in their cart. Then he asks why they are talking. He demands that his men catch all the mice. All the mice were caught in bags. They tried to escape and screamed, cursing at the human race. Camelos bowed and apologized to Diaz. He wanted to express his apology in a more proper manner. Diaz says the man doesn't need to apologize. Camelos says that the mice are a people living in their territory, so he can't leave until he apologizes. Diaz looks at the man in surprise and suggests that the mice are similar to the beastmen. Camelos explained the differences between the beastmen. He said that they all have a certain culture and can speak words. Diaz recalls a myth from his childhood. He recalls a phrase from God and believes that mice are also half human. Camelos tells us that these mice belong to a race of long-eared jumping mice tribe. They claim to be a people of the desert. Diaz is surprised that there is a desert in Eldan's territory. He has never heard of a desert kingdom. Camelos continues and tells about how mice call the desert their homeland. He tells their approximate location. Diaz becomes more serious when he thinks that they met a slave hunter. The mice continue to jump into the bags and scream. Diaz assumed that Eldan had protected and promised to return the desert to them, but they did not believe Eldan. Even though he did so, Eldan was still a great man, as he carefully protected his clan. Camelos tells how Eldan, having become a lord, promised to return the mice their homeland. Aruna at this point says that Camelos used to be white, but now he is blue. She thinks that they can forgive him without compensation, since he is now blue. Then the girl remembers that the mice were bright red. She says that next time, they won't be so tactful. Camelos looks at Diaz with intensity. The man smiles and says he doesn't need to apologize for that incident. He says that even if the man insists on his own way, he will accept the apology. Diaz says the mice have serious behavioral issues. He's not sure they'll be as tactful next time. He thinks of giving the mice advice and leaving their punishment to Camelos. Camelos smiles and obeys. He thanks Diaz. Aruna and Diaz smile. A beastman approaches Camelos and says that they have finished their inspection. He claims something that is difficult to confirm by smell this time. The servant says that their scent has spread everywhere, and that there is a lot of spice in the cargo. Camelos says he understands everything. He is going to check the cargo. He personally inspected each cart. As a result, nothing unusual was found. That was the end of the inspection. The mice were sent back to Eldan. They were to receive appropriate punishment after being questioned about the reason why they attacked Diaz. Diaz turned to Camelos and asked him about spices. He also asked about transporting household tools. Camelos says he forgot to tell Diaz about it, because of all the noise. He says all the tools were ready. Then he hands over an envelope and asks Diaz to look at the spices. The letter stated that if he didn't have enough tools, Eldan would provide more. Eldan also hoped that Diaz would like the spices. Finally, Eldan talks about the future territorial trade below and about their last meeting. The man wished good luck and waited for a new meeting. At the end of the letter, it was written that the current things were a gift, so Diaz did not have to pay for them. He wanted to do this as a proof of their friendship. Camelos approaches Diaz and says that Eldan sent the prepared building material, mentioning the stables. Diaz is surprised. The servants who stood behind Camelos said that Diaz need not worry, since they had been sent in connection with the construction. Diaz was worried that he had received so many different things and had not given anything in return. Camelos asks if Diaz would like to try holding the reins. He points to the cart with the horses and says that it is now Diaz's property. Aruna looks at the horses with admiration. Camelos continues to talk about the horses. He says that with the coachman's guidance, Diaz will be able to control them immediately. Aruna approaches Diaz and asks if all this is true. The man confirms that it is true. The man doesn't have time to say anything to Aruna, as she runs up to the horse and rejoices that they have acquired them. Diaz did not know that horses were the tribe's main means of transportation and locomotion. The man suggested that owning a large number of horses was a sign of wealth and courage. Aruna's family could not afford something like that. Diaz looked at the girl and wondered if there had ever been a time when Aruna had not been worried about her family. Aruna turns around and says that she has had a dream since she was a child to become a woman from a tribe with horses. She did not expect that they would get horses so quickly with Diaz's help. Diaz does not have time to say anything as Aruna starts hugging him. She thanked Diaz and said she would take care of the horses. He asked if Aruna had calmed down, but she continued to hug him. At this time, Ima was sitting in the cart and wondering if it was all over. She thought that they would find her. The mouse decided to get out of the cart, but she couldn't, because something was blocking her way. The mouse begs someone to help her.
Aiton's sister runs up to her
and asks to look at the tea leaves. She says she will share with her sister. The girl suggests that the seeds in the tea are the same thing. Her sister agrees with her. Then, the girls remember that their parents also liked tea. Truchi's grandmother tells Diaz to hold the reins tightly. He claims that Buffalo has already gotten used to field work. The old woman says that she understands and moves forward. The man worked with a plow. He was amazed by the capabilities of this tool, because, thanks to it, the cultivation of the field was progressing well. After a few hours of work, Diaz decided to take a break. Chiruchi said to leave the land for a few days. She suggested continuing in 3 days. Diaz thought about the process of plowing the field. He compared his field with Grandma Terra's field. Chiruchi suggests seeing if anything will grow in the field this time. In the meantime, she suggests digging a reservoir. Diaz asks about the reservoir. Grandma explains how the reservoir system works in their village. Then, the grandmother asks if Diaz has figured out how the reservoir works. The man says that he needs to make a reservoir. The grandmother praises the man. The girls run up to Diaz and ask if he has finished plowing the fields. He replies that he is still working. He wonders what the girls wanted to ask. The girls hesitated for a while. Then they said that Aruna was preparing dinner, so the man had to go back. Diaz is happy and thanks the girls for inviting him. Then he notices that the girls have become dejected. The man picks up the girls and tries to figure out what's wrong with them. They ask if Diaz has a hard time plowing the field. The man says it's not hard. Then one of the girls asks if Diaz will be upset if the field doesn't work out. He says he won't be too upset. The girl then looks up at Diaz sadly and asks if he would be upset if he found out they were hiding something. The man looks at the girl for a moment and then says that the chances of him getting upset are too small. He says that everyone has little secrets. The girls smile uncertainly. Diaz wonders what might have happened. The girls fall to the ground and run away. The man watches them, not understanding what happened. The man continued to worry and asked the girls about the secret several times, but he never received an answer. Aruna also did not understand what secret the girls were hiding. Everyone in the village asked the girls about the secret, but they did not tell anything. Diaz was very worried. He wondered what could have happened. He watched them for a while, but did not notice anything unusual. The man thought that children of that age could behave strangely. He decided to forget about the incident. Aruna informed him that 3 days had passed, so he could begin sowing. She handed him the necessary seeds and explained their effect. The girl assumed that these seeds were to be used to test the success of the field. The man thanked the girl. Diaz thought that thanks to the fertilizers, all the seeds should quickly germinate. He was looking forward to this moment. Klouse approached Diaz and reported that Kamalos's group had completed building the stable. Diaz couldn't believe that Kamalos and his minions were able to build a stable so quickly. Diaz learned that the stables were built quickly using processed material that could simply be assembled on site, an easy and preferred method of construction. Diaz thanks Kamalos. The man says he was simply following Eldan's instructions. Diaz says he prepared the material not as payment, but as an expression of feelings. He points his hand to the side and says he wants Kamalos to accept them. Kamalos asks about the material. Diaz says that it is the materials of the Earth Dragon. Everyone is scared. Kamalos refuses and says that he cannot accept such a gift. One of the servants asks what Diaz is up to. The man smiles and then apologizes. In the end, Kamalos and his servants treated the gifts as things received for safekeeping. They could only accept them with the signing of a power of attorney. The next morning, Kamalos announced that they were leaving. Diaz thanked the man for his help. Aruna watched from the sidelines, while the girls, who were upset, clung to her. Diaz remembers how shy the girls were around Kamalos the first time. He thinks that over time they got used to him, which is why they were upset. Aruna asks the girls to stop crying. She says they will have to take care of the horses later. Aruna claims that if the girls do not hurry, the horses will start crying, become thirsty and hungry. Diaz looks at the field and wonders about its condition. He notices that the sprouts have withered. Aruna approaches Diaz. The man smiles and says that he did not expect success. He offers to sow again. The next day, the new crops also withered. Aruna approached the man again. He turned around and assumed that there was not enough fertilizer. He decided to add a little more. The next day, the man added more fertilizer, but the crops still did not sprout. Aruna approached the man again. Diaz decided that there was not enough fertilizer again. He decided to increase the volume. The man repeated the same thing, but the crops still did not sprout. Aruna went to Diaz again to support him, but the man only made a face and stood up. Diaz was still wondering if he should add more rock fertilizer. Aruna grabbed the man's hand and asked him to stop. She wanted him to rest. Aruna says that it is not possible to mix rock fertilizer with leaves in such quantities. She claims that it is impossible to cultivate fields in these meadows. Diaz agrees, saying that sometimes the seeds don't grow, but he decides that he needs to focus on other things. Diaz and Aruna return home. The girls watch them go and wonder what to do. Aiken said that she wanted to help Diaz, but she doesn't know what to do. At that moment, the girl takes out a small glass container. Suddenly, the girls heard a sound. Aiken asked her sister if she heard an unfamiliar voice asking for help. The girls decide to go and see where the sound came from. At this time, Ima was screaming in one of the huts. She was asking for help. She assumed that about a week had passed. It was hard for her without water. Ima thinks that she should have asked Diaz for help when the man was carrying the box. The girls enter the hut. The mouse gets scared. The girls ask if there is anyone inside. Ima screams for help. The girls realize that their guesses have been confirmed. Ima tells them that she is in the box and cannot get out. The girls say that they will get him out soon. Ima asks if everything is okay. She assumes that the girls are trying to save her. He asks them not to overdo it and to call the adults. Ima asks if everything is okay. She assumes that the girls are trying to save her. He asks them not to overdo it and to call the adults. The girls say that all the adults are busy. Ima asks him to listen to her. He says that he can wait a little longer. The girls say that they are almost done. The girls throw off the extra bags and finally free Ima. The mouse screams that the girls saved him. He thanks them and says that it was hard for him. The girls greet the mouse and introduce themselves. They are happy to see the mouse. The girls compliment Amy. The mouse thanks them. Ama also introduces herself in response and talks about where she comes from. At this time, Aruna saw that Diaz was continuing to plow the field. She demanded that he stop. The man thought that he would succeed this time. The girl screams that he looks like a slave. The girls wondered why AIMA was locked inside the box. They assumed that he was being punished for doing something bad. Ima screams and says that she did nothing wrong. She tells about how she got into the box. The girls ask how the mouse feels about Diaz. Ima says she has never spoken to Diaz. She says they are not friends. The girls look at each other. Then they decide to consult with Ima. They say that they have one secret. Ima asked what secret the girls were hiding. She assumed that there was someone more suitable for the role. The girls said that no one in the village was suitable for the role. All their friends would tell Diaz the secret. And they don't want that. The girls talk about how Diaz cultivates the field every day, but nothing works out for him. The girls say that the earth has no power, so Diaz's methods do not work. They claim that they can do something about unfitness, but they cannot do it for a person. The girls remember what their parents told them about the forest shaping power. They thought that people would abuse this power if they found out. They told them that people should not see the moment of using the power. But the girls wanted to help Diaz. Ima wasn't human, so they could tell her everything. They asked what they should do. Ima asked if the girls could tell her a little more about it. The girls told her everything. They asked if Ima understood everything. Ima asks the girls to wait. She asks what race the girls are. The girls confirm that they are forest dwellers who protect and study the forest. Ima begins to remember all the information she knows about the forest people. She remembered that dying forest people put their strength and knowledge into the seed. The girls tell of planting seeds in important places. Before dying, forest dwellers give their seed to a loved one to become a forest. Those who are entrusted with the seed grow it to form a forest. The seed grows and becomes a tree, like a gravestone. Forest people live in the forest to protect these trees. Ima felt that the girls had two powers. The first power accelerates the growth of trees and grass, and the second power is the ability to create barriers. The mouse understood that these powers are needed to protect the forest. Ima asks if she is still fit to be an assistant. The girls say that she is, because Ima is smart. Ima understood that the girls were still young and could not create a forest, but they could cover the forest with a small barrier. Ima understood that if the girls continued, the trees would grow at an astonishing rate. Ima understood why the girls' parents asked them to keep everything a secret. The only thing the mouse didn't understand was why the girls were living with Diaz. She thought it was better to be away from people. The girls said that at first they were afraid of Diaz. At first they thought of running away. He reminded them of their dad, so they decided to stay, despite his terrible smell. The girls say that Diaz is very kind, kinder than anyone in the village. So they think that they can tell him about the secret. They assume that they will not abuse the power. Ima understood that the girls are facing a difficult choice, so they wanted to consult. Ima asks if the power of the forest dwellers is needed for a good field, since the power of the earth is being drawn out. The girls talk about how this place is pulling all the forces of the earth. They talk about the process of pulling. Ima suggests understanding the true nature of the pulling and considering various countermeasures. The girls say they don't know. The girls think that this is not a bad child. They talk about the terrible consequences of the stretching. Ima begins to understand the essence of the stretching process. It seems to her that someone causes such an effect. Mouse thinks about the soil and climate conditions. Ima was tense because the question of how to use the power of the barrier without revealing itself was still relevant. Mouse asks if the girls can use their powers secretly. The girls say they can't because Diaz is always on the field. Mouse asks if they can do it in the middle of the night when everyone is asleep. The girls say they are asleep at that time too and can't wake up in time. The mouse offers to wake them up. He says that he can see well at night. He claims that he can help them if they tell him where their home is. The girls are happy that they were able to consult. Ima understands that it was not in vain that she listened to the girls' story. Ima suggests deciding their plan of action right away. She asks the girls to calm down. She says that they could be exposed. The girls couldn't stop, but Ima started to worry. At night, Ima tried to find the hut where the girls lived. She finds a hole in the wall and goes inside. The mouse immediately sees Diaz and gets scared. Then he sneezes. But Diaz doesn't wake up. The mouse thinks it was dangerous. The mouse finds the twins and tries to wake them up. She tells them that they need to wake up and go to the field. The girls wake up. Then they fall asleep again. The girls finally wake up and go outside. Ima notices their agitation and asks what happened. The girls say that they are scared and cold. Mouse asks how they went to the toilet in the dark. The girls tell that Diaz and Aruna always went with them. The girls step forward and take out their parents' seeds. The girls smile and say that the seeds of mom and daddy cheer them up, so they always carry them with them. Aim understood. They approach the field. The girls ask the mouse to wait. Ima looked at the field created by Diaz. The girls took out the seeds and stood opposite each other. The girls began to cast spells. They noticed that the seeds rose and sparkled. Ima was surprised. The girls looked at each other in delight and continued to cast their spells. At that moment, the light spread around them, and then he disappeared again. The girls continued to cast spells as Ima tried to understand what they were saying. The girls report that they have a good barrier. They started rubbing their eyes and say that they want to sleep. The mouse asks if the girls have finished with the barrier. She notices that the girls are sleepy and go home. She understands that her duty is over. The girls went back to bed and fell asleep. They were talking in their sleep. The mouse was lying between the girls. She was asking them to free her before anyone noticed. But the girls were already asleep. In the morning, in the territory of Kasdex, in the city of Melangal, a discussion was taking place in a tavern. Everyone was discussing the fact that Eldan had gone to the royal capital, and that he had taken the magic stone with him. One of the visitors says that if he gives a magic stone, he will have happy memories. He thinks that in this case, the territory of Kasdex will become even more peaceful. Another visitor says that humans rarely try to get close to half-humans. He thinks Eldan is up to something. One of the tavern patrons heard that the Dragon Slayer had a demi-human wife. He heard that they were in love. The patrons heard that the Dragon Slayer came from the East. They also heard that the Eastern human race was famous for its hatred of humans. They also heard that Diaz had never heard of demi-humans until recently. The visitors discussed that the Dragon Slayer's wife was the first human he met. They thought that Diaz fell in love with his wife and fell in love with other half-humans. The visitors laughed that even the Dragon Slayer couldn't defeat the woman. One of the visitors says that it was thanks to his wife that a friendly relationship was formed between Eldan and the Dragon Slayer. The half-beast asks the visitors what race the Dragon Slayer's wife is. Another visitor replies that there are no details, but he heard that she grows a horn. The half-beast visitor assumes that she is of the rhinoceros race. He thinks that the human race has fallen in love with the rhinoceros race. A deer-like visitor asks if his friends have seen the sign the Dragon Slayer made for recruiting residents. One of the visitors says that he saw this sign, he remembers what was written on it. Then he says that several of the dog people race were interested. They also discuss the attack of the long-eared jumping mice. He says that the attack was organized by a mastermind. When asked about the mastermind, the visitor says that a person incited the mice to attack. Most visitors had never heard of the race of ape men, so everyone assumed it was a ploy. They assumed that a self-proclaimed race of ape men was on the property. One of the customers tells that it was a tall man who covered his face with a black cloth. The customers of the tavern cannot believe how the mice could trust a suspicious person. Suddenly they notice such a guy. The man in the black cloak cannot understand what the beastmen are talking about. He thinks that they are easy to deceive because they are fools. No matter how much gold he shows, they still do not listen to him. In the end, the suspicious guy was able to fool only the mice. But he didn't expect anything from them, but he still intended to deal with Diaz. Two knights were discussing the defections from Diana's faction. They sensed the end of that faction. One of the knights heard that the Maiza faction had lost Duke Kasdex, who controlled the Western Trade Zone. They were wondering who would be appointed to the throne. The knights discussed Richard and Isabella's allies. They were also interested in learning the truth about the royal family's lineage. The knights were tense because the future direction would change. They also heard that the king's second son was on good terms with Diaz. He talks about their friendly relationship. The knight heard that Diaz became the lord of the Neutros meadows. The second knight heard many interesting things about these lands. He was especially attracted by the story of the curse. His interlocutor considers it a fairy tale. The knights continue to discuss the future of the kingdom and the person and role of Diaz in all this. Suddenly, the commander runs up to the knights and tells them that Diana has led a significant number of soldiers. It seems to him that they have gone beyond the capital. The knights ask why they are making such a noise if this is a normal thing. The commander-in-chief reports that Diana has taken a huge number of soldiers and wagons with her. He believes that the war is starting again. The knights said that this could be ignored, since someone else would deal with it. Aruna wakes up and sees the girls who were dressed up. Then she looks closer and notices a mouse who wishes her good morning. Aruna screams in fear, causing Diaz to wake up. There were many incidents from the morning. There was an uneasy atmosphere. The twins slept with a mouse. No one understood why they took a mouse that could become a source of diseases. In the end, the girls told everything and were punished. Gelant flies to Diaz. The man begins to understand what caused the screaming voices he heard earlier. He was worried that it would be a repeat attack. He thought that Ema was bright blue, so Aruna said not to worry. Gelant tilts her head and asks about the color. Diaz says she can forget about it. Then the seeds of the crops sown in the field in the evening sprouted. He believed that it was a natural incident. Diaz noticed a perfect circle in the field. Diaz also noticed that the additives in the soil in his field and in his grandmother's field were different. He did not understand the reason for this formation. Gelant laughs and says that this is an amazing story. Gelant says that there are very noisy birds flying in the field. Diaz asks if Gelant of the pigeon people really understands other birds. He hears laughter in response. Gelant says that such things are impossible for her. Diaz frowns. Diaz remembers the third incident, when the twins made a mess in the warehouse. Diaz finished cleaning the warehouse. but he was worried about the beans that fell out of the chest. Jalant laughs again and says that you can't throw beans out of the chest. Diaz realized that the bird's visit was the biggest incident of the day for him. The man remembers how he collected beans, and on the way out he met Jalant of the pigeon people. He was very scared. Then Jalant asked why there was so much noise in their community. Jalant remembers his assignment. He was supposed to deliver a letter from Eldan. Diaz was supposed to confirm it. Diaz doesn't understand Jalant at first. Then he goes down and opens the bag. There were 3 letters inside. The first was an apology. The second was a warning about the alarming movement. And the third was about the sign about the recruitment of residents. They showed interest in it. Diaz raises his head and asks Jalant what little species means. He knew nothing about it. Jalant said that among the dog people there is a big species and a small species. He explained the differences between them. Jalant said that the small species are very clumsy. Jalant thinks that the small species had difficulty working because of their clumsiness. Diaz thinks about adopting this look. He decides to go and ask the others right away. Diaz turns around and notices Jalant, who is looking at the beans with a predatory expression. He says that the pigeon can eat them. Diaz approached Klouse and asked him what he thought about dog people. Klouse was fine with it. The others weren't either. Diaz decided to ask Aruna. He saw that she was still scolding the girls for the mouse in the bed. The girls were delighted when they heard the news. Aruna said that they won't be able to teach in such an atmosphere anymore. Diaz asks if the girls have told anything. Aruna says the girls are thinking about what they did. The twins didn't say anything about it anyway. Diaz suggests that there are reasons, or that they are hiding something. He believes that they have no bad intentions. Diaz suggests that they wait. Aruna smiles and agrees. Then Diaz notices a mouse behind the girls. He remembers Aruna's soul assessment. Then he wonders how the girls could have befriended such a creature. Diaz kneels down and asks how Ima ended up in this place. Mouse says it will be a long story. Diaz zips up the pigeon's bag and releases it. Jalant takes off and flies away. He flew away with a letter written by Diaz. He has to deliver the letter in a day. Diaz wrote in the letter about Ame and the adoption of human dogs. Ima sat on Diaz's shoulder and talked about how she was now counting on him. Diaz smiled. He was glad that she had decided to live with them in the village. Ima told everything. At the end of her story, she decided that she would live in the village of Eluk. Diaz asked about the reason. Ima answered that she wanted to be near the twins. She was worried about them. Ima told that she could read and write. She could also teach girls. She asked the man to let her stay. Her desire was unwavering. Diaz introduced Ima to everyone and asked their opinion. Everyone was fine with it, except Aruna. She looked sullen. The mouse asked Aruna to confuse her with other mice. Aruna finally agreed, but set some conditions. Thus, Ima became a member of the Eluk village. The man was looking around the warehouse and noticed that some luggage was missing. He was looking for a barrel of wine. Ima says she heard that the wine barrel may have been used for a welcoming party. She suggests they go and see it right away. Diaz walked out of the warehouse and saw that the barrel of wine had indeed been taken to the hall for the welcoming party. Ima asks what the grandmothers are needing. Diaz guesses that they are making something with sugar. The mouse screams and jumps off Diaz's shoulder. She asks the grandmothers to let her try the sugar. Diaz didn't understand when everyone decided to start preparing for the holiday. Aruna noticed the man's confusion and approached him. She asks if he is surprised. The man replies that he is indeed surprised. He asks when they had time to prepare so much. The girl claims that Diaz was simply busy. She smiles and says that they decided to start preparing. She says that Diaz was writing a letter at that time. Diaz looks at the girl, and she looks back at him. She then says that Diaz didn't consult her and hid the wine. Aruna asks if that was the right thing to do. The kingdom had laws. Diaz was also worried about alcohol being addictive. He doesn't know what the laws are in the village. But Aruna had just turned 15, so he was worried about her health and hid the wine. Aruna smiles and says that she is not angry at all, because Diaz did it for her. She began to understand everything a long time ago. The girl looks at the man and says that it was a small revenge. She would like Diaz to consult with her because they are husband and wife. Aruna blushes and says that she gets sad at such moments. She wants Diaz to tell her everything. Aruna suggests they talk about the two of them in more detail, since they are husband and wife. Diaz apologizes and says he will listen to her. Diaz talks about wine. The girl looks menacingly at the man and convinces him that he is talking nonsense. She claims that wine is good for you. Aruna tells about horse milk wine, and also about how a family with a horse gives it to a child who has been weaned. Diaz is outraged and says that a baby cannot be given wine to drink. He says that it is terrible. Aruna gets angry and says that all this is not true. She tells about her experience. The grandmother lightly hits Diaz on the back. The man asks what happened. Grandma replied that Diaz and Aruna get along well. She asks them to help with the party. Diaz tried to justify himself, but his grandmother interrupted him and said that they had found a barrel of wine, so they could have some fun. Diaz was stunned that Aruna was concerned about the dwindling wine supply after the arrival of the dogmen. He believed that she was beyond help.
Aruna turns away.
Diaz looks at her with a smile and thinks that this was Aruna's true intention. He felt that he was also guilty for not discussing this with her, so he decided not to say anything more. New races and cultures are constantly appearing in the village of Eluk. Diaz decided to make his own rules to prevent unrest. Diaz understood that he was a lord, so he had to protect the village from any enemies. The next day the party ended. There was an unusual liquid for breakfast. The girl explained that it was kumis. She thought about what Diaz said about alcohol, so she took the new drink to the neighboring villages. Diaz asks how a girl can drink alcohol in the morning. She asks the man to take a sip. Diaz takes a sip of kumis and is surprised. He asks if it is really alcohol. Grandma says it would take a lot of it to get drunk. Diaz realized that it was a very weak alcohol. He thought that in this case it would be possible to give a small amount to the child to drink. Aruna talks about the positive properties of kumis. Diaz realized that the girl considered kumis to be alcohol, so she said that it was useful. But for him, alcohol is many times stronger. That is why their opinions did not coincide. Diaz realized that they needed to discuss situations like this because they had their own customs and past. It seemed to Diaz that from the atmosphere it spread to everyone in the village. Soon everyone began to communicate with each other more often. Diaz and the grandmother were sewing. At that moment, the twins ran up to them and showed that they had collected a lot of yamoshi. Diaz thanked the girls. The girls raised their hands and said they wanted to cultivate the field. The man said he had no objection. He smiles and says that next time he will cultivate a small field. He says that it is dangerous to place it too far away, so he suggests doing it near the horses. The girls thank Diaz. Diaz turns around and thanks the grandmothers for their work. They thank him in return. The man is stopped by Grandma Celia. She wanted to talk about something. In the evening, everyone gathered to discuss Grandma Celia's proposal. She said that there was no need to ask the opinion of all the villagers. She believes that everyone agrees with Diaz without thinking much. She also says that we need to think about what to do if opinions are divided. Grandma suggested choosing representatives in the group who would collect people's opinions and pass them on to Diaz. They would also have to be confident in expressing their opinions. Everyone agreed, then continued the discussion. Everyone was able to discuss the rules in detail. Diaz was responsible for the decision. Aruna made suggestions regarding the care of the house. Grandma Maya expresses her opinion as a representative of a group of people. Klouse speaks as a territorial commander and is responsible for military affairs. Representatives had to collect people's opinions in advance and attend meetings, as well as express their opinions. Aima, since she has an education, also decided to become a representative of the Beastmen group. Diaz and the rest of the village decided to follow the rules. The dog people would also have to choose their representative. The meeting lasted until late at night, until it ended with important decisions being made. Aruna woke Diaz up and told him that they had guests. He asked why they had arrived early in the morning. The girl said that she was asleep, so she did not notice the guests until they came close to the village. She said that she would tell everything on the way. The girl assumed that it was a dog people. She saw several people of different sizes. Diaz guessed who it could be. The girl still didn't know. She wanted to guess something, but suddenly screamed that there was someone ahead. Aruna and Diaz were surprised to see an anaconda attacking the dog people as they tried to escape. The anaconda opened its mouth. At this point, Diaz asked what was going on. Aruna was also still trying to comprehend what was happening. The girl screamed that it was an anaconda. Diaz asks what that means. He didn't hear about them bringing a monster. The girl says that the anaconda is chasing them. Aruna realizes that she left her bow and arrows at home. At this moment, the anaconda is about to reach its victims. Diaz and the others watch in horror. She grabs one of the dogmen. They were screaming for help. The man rushed forward. Aruna screamed. She asked him to stop because they did not have weapons. The anaconda opened its mouth wide and tried to attack Diaz's will. But the man struck the snake, and the deviation sought to grab her. The snake began to wriggle, and Diaz held it tighter. As a result, Diaz was able to defeat the snake. Aruna runs up to the man and says that he acted too recklessly. The man apologizes. The dog people approach the anaconda, open their mouths, and ask if one of them is okay. One of the dog people comes out of the mouth and says that he is alive. Everyone is happy. Aruna is tensed for not taking her bow and arrows. She promises not to make such mistakes again. One guest thanks Diaz for his help. She tells him what happened. Then she asks Diaz and Aruna to introduce themselves. Diaz and Aruna do so. The guest introduces herself as Canis. She tells that under Eldan's command, she looks after a small species and accompanies them as a leader. Canis tells about who is a candidate for resettlement. She points to the black-furred Tibe Masti. Then the girl talks about the brown-haired Basenji. And finally, she talks about the black-haired Osun Shepu. Canis says that clan names are very important. Aruna was doing the soul assessment at the time. She went to Diaz and told him that she had finished the assessment. She told him what she had seen. Canis remembers that all of the small species were planning to do some kind of work. She asks Diaz if he can provide them with work. The dog people, begging, look at Diaz. The man begins to tell about where they need helpers. Diaz said that the dog people can start working. He says that he can provide them with any job. The dog people start jumping for joy. He asks them to calm down. And all the dog people immediately obeyed the man. Diaz noticed this. Diaz leans down. Aruna continues to look at the man. And Canis is surprised. Diaz introduces himself again and says he is pleased to meet you.
Aruna leans in as well.
Canis is struck by the fact that they are speaking at the same eye level as human dogs. She thought Diaz was unusual. The dogs line up and introduce themselves. First, the chief of the Mastai clan introduced himself and extended his paw to Diaz. Diaz shook it and said he was glad to meet him. Then the chief of the clan, Sidorio Barsenji, introduced himself. He told about what they are ready to help the community with. Diaz also shook his paw and said that it was nice to meet him. He also told about who can help them. Diaz turns around and notices another dog man, who immediately runs up to him and introduces himself as the chief of the Raihato Godafunyadasef Osun Shepu clan. He says they want to take care of the horses. He is pleased. Aruna and Diaz smile. The man agrees and says that he will trust him with the horses and sheep. Diaz turns his head and notices that Aruna begins to greet everyone and introduce herself. The dog people wondered if Aruna was really Diaz's wife. They thought she was young and beautiful. Aruna smiled. The leaders of each valve gave a report. There were a lot of guests, so everyone was greeted on occasion. Canis turns to Diaz and asks if the man was serious about making soldiers out of the small species. She argued that it was better for them to perform simple tasks, since they were physically weak. Diaz thinks. He remembers being told about this. The man understands that Canis is very worried. The man, along with Canis and Aruna, approach Klouse. Diaz thanks him for the patrol. Klouse thanks him in return for his work and asks who came with them. Diaz introduced the guests. Klouse greeted Canis. The girl also greeted the guy. They looked at each other with admiration for a while. At that moment, they felt something unusual. Aruna understood everything immediately, but Diaz didn't understand anything at all. The dog people asked the grandmothers what they would do. Some of them accompanied Sanai and Aiken to collect stones. It seemed to Diaz that the stones had the power of fertilizer. It was thanks to the fertilizer that the plants took strong roots and grew. The dog people were also working near the well. Diaz watched them and thought that 10 days had passed since they came to them. Diaz looked at the girls and assumed that their parents had taught them how to use stones. They remembered this and began to work on the fields. Diaz turned around at the noise. He saw dog people who were going to work. They were very happy. Diaz noticed that Canis's concerns about the dog people's awkwardness were not a problem. Diaz made suitable tools for them. Klouse shouted for the group to come to him at once. The dog people surrounded the man. Canis and Diaz watched the scene. All the dog people rushed and began to attack Klouse. Diaz watched in amazement as they tackled Klouse to the ground and began licking him. Klouse had lost again. He claimed that the efficiency was getting better every day. Diaz knew that Klouse was a veteran who had survived the war. After that, he had defeated several generals and was nicknamed Klouse the Decapitator. He did not expect that he could be defeated in 10 days. Diaz saw that Canis was worried, and he was worried about it. He decided not to remind about territorial duties, as he decided that it would be better to demonstrate in practice. During the war, military dogs caused a lot of trouble, so he decided that human dogs would be effective. But the planes were only attacked by robbers. So Diaz decided that the dog people would not have to fight dangerous enemies. There was a party in the tomb of the founding king of the kingdom of Sans Serif. They were examining the jewels. Princess Diana said that the party was not allowed to touch the coffin and the statues. She claims that the treasures would be used for military expenses, so they had to be hidden in pockets. The woman looked at the statues with a smile. She took the scepter in her hands and smiled. At that moment, a girl turned to her and asked what she was going to do with the scepter. Diana smiled and said that she would use it. She tells the legend of the founding kings. Diana suggests first dealing with Diaz and then forming an army and taking over the country. Diana tells the girl that she doesn't have to worry. She claims that she has a secret plan. The girl is surprised. Diana shows the royal seal. The woman gets angry and says that Diaz ended the war and then dared to refuse her kind offer. She was very angry. The woman also heard that Diaz dealt harshly with people. She believed that he became famous because of false merits. She wanted justice. The girl from the squad thought Diana was crazy. She realized that she had to tell Richard about it. At this time, the fair-haired boy arrived at the royal tomb. He laughed because he did not think that the members of the royal family would be deceived even more easily. He thought Diana was stupid, but for the guy it was a chance. He was going to deal with Diana and Diaz, and he also wanted to take revenge on all his offenders. The guy was going to become a hero of the country. He laughed madly. In the evening, the first Prince Richard appeared in the royal hall. He was constantly hiding behind Diana. Everyone around believed that Richard had attacked the royal tomb, but they believed that no intervention was necessary. Richard sits down and says that it will not be possible to pacify the enemies, since there is a risk of encountering Diaz. The assembled asked what this had to do with the previous order. Richard replied that it was all Diaz's fault. He believed that Diana was taking a huge risk. Richard began to list all of Diaz's nicknames. He also talks about the decree that was issued during the war, and how Diaz behaved kindly. Richard claimed that some of Diaz's nicknames were wrong. He tells the story of Diaz hearing strange sounds in a barn and rushing there. When he went inside, he saw a girl surrounded by guys. The man let go of the girl and tied up the boys. One of the boys made excuses, but Diaz just smiled and hit him. The guy was a nobleman, so Diaz was taken to the royal court. Diaz stated his position. The king considered Diaz to be absolutely right, so the others supported Diaz and the case was closed. Richard reports the problem. He says Diaz can deal with anyone, as status is not important to him. He says not to mess with Diaz. One of the nobles says that Diaz will not dare to raise his hand against the king. Richard says that something like this has happened before. Everyone listens attentively to the man. Richard tells how it happened. A man approached Richard and said he had a question that was bothering him. He asked why the king had exiled Diaz to the border region. Richard didn't like the man's manner. He says that's a wrong assumption. Then he says that his father didn't exile him at all. Richard says that the king trusted Diaz to look after the plane. He says that someone he could trust was needed. Richard talks about his father's attitude towards Diaz. The man asks if this is true. Diaz talks about the situation in the country and the need for trust, and also about Diaz's reliability. Diaz talks about how his father prepared capable people and materials, but Maisa's group intervened.
A girl approaches Richard and
says she has a question. She asks who in the royal family Diaz has harmed. Everyone is silent. Richard looks displeased. His guards sigh heavily. And the girl is surprised when a servant approaches her. The servant tells Richard's story. How he was surrounded by enemy troops and only saved by Diaz. But then Diaz hit him on the head for being stupid. Richard says that this is the only time someone hit him with all his strength. In custody, Diaz began to lecture him. The girl was surprised. The servant says that thanks to this, Richard became hardworking and honest, and also grew up to be a handsome prince. Richard says that he would have reconsidered his views anyway. Richard is still grateful to Diaz. He insists that incompetent people should be eliminated before it's too late. The guy snaps his fingers, and a bag of money is brought to him. The man picks up a bag of money and says they will deal with Diana. Richard orders the man to return the royal seal. The man demands payment for the expenses. Richard says he will pay for them later. At this time, in the village, the girls were laughing because Diaz had a white mustache. Aruna pointed out that the twins also had white mustaches. Everyone laughed. At this time, Diana was screaming in the house, angry that everyone had abandoned her. She thought she was doing the right thing. The woman looked at the scepter and smiled. She was going to rule the country. Diaz suddenly felt something unusual. Aruna asked what happened. The man replied that everything was fine and pointed to the food. Aruna asked him not to embarrass him, and the girls laughed. The human dog gets hit on the head. Klouse apologizes and asks if she's okay. Canis runs around worriedly with a first aid kit. At this point, Klouse and Canis look at each other again. They find reasons why they can't be together and turn away from each other. Diaz shouts to Sidori to raise the threshold. Sidori obeys him, and the huge pit fills with water. All the dog people were happy that the reservoir was completed. Diaz is also pleased that they were able to complete the reservoir before the summer. He was also pleased with the increase in crop yields. Diaz continued to ponder until Bayars pulled his hair. The man looked at the horse and became afraid. Bayars was supposed to be his horse. Diaz was not very good at riding, but Aruna partly forced him to take the horse and make him mount it. There were also 3 other horses. Everyone knew how to handle horses except Diaz. Bayars began to pull Diaz's hair again. The man thought that all horses were smart enough to understand words. Diaz noticed that horses like to play pranks, but it did not cause him unpleasant feelings. But when he mounts Bayars, then the man experiences difficulties. Bayars and Diaz walk to the twins' field. The man notices that the girls have fallen asleep. They dreamed of their parents. Diaz smiled and looked at the horse. He decided to free the horse and let him sleep with the girls. The horse did so. Suddenly, Jalant flew up to Diaz. He asked what had happened. The dove reported that Eldan had conveyed an important message to which he wanted an answer. The message said that a few days ago, Diana visited the territory of Kasdex in the Lord's mansion. She demanded a meeting with Eldan. The man had to agree. The woman said that she was going to deal with Diaz and demanded that Eldan agree to cooperate. Eldan could not refuse, since it was a royal order. The woman showed an order that disclosed all the conditions and goals of their cooperation. But the order was not drawn up in the royal form. However, the man saw the seal. Eldan knew that the seal only confirms official documents. He assumed that this order was a forgery. But according to the law, with the seal, it becomes authentic. Eldan read the order and told Diana that he wanted to discuss it with the advisors, as the conditions were making him nervous. Eldan used hospitality to stall for time, continuing the meeting. The man did not want to cooperate with Diana, and wanted to deal with everyone who followed her. One of the advisors asked Eldan to think about the future. Eldan refused to go against Diaz. He had heard of Diaz's achievements and believed that thanks to him, the plane had a promising future. Eldan would like to refuse Diana, but he first needed to deal with her group. As a result, those present were unable to come to a conclusion. One of the advisors raised his hand and asked the man what he thought of Diaz. The advisor said that Diaz's opinion should be taken into account. The man said that he had already sent him a message and was waiting for a response. Eldan says it is necessary to temporarily suspend the discussion. The advisor says his daughter's letter makes one think. At this moment, Jalant flies into the hall. Eldan praises him for his work and asks what Diaz said. The dove straightened up and said that Eldan could read the letter. Diaz unfolded the letter and read it. He was very surprised. All the advisors began to whisper. One of the advisors asked what was written in the letter. He asked the pigeon to tell. Gallant sighed and said that Diaz had suggested Eldan to start cooperation with Diana. All the advisors were shocked. At this time, Canis approached Klouse and asked what he wanted. Klouse announces that he and Diaz will be fighting, so the man decides to confess his feelings to Canis. Canis screams that he loves her. The girl is surprised and also confesses that she loves him. Diaz, who was watching this scene, is surprised. Canis and Klouse begin to discuss the prospects of their relationship. Canis says that nothing matters to her except her relationship with Klouse. The man hugs Canis. The girls ask what's going on. Aruna comes up to them and takes them away, telling them not to worry. Klouse promises to return from the battle and hugs Canis tighter. The girl cries and says she will wait for him. The dog people lined up, asking what was going on. In the morning, Diaz and Klouse were standing in a field. The man said it was war. Klouse lowered his telescope and agreed with him. 5 days later, it was time for war. Diana stood with her army. Eldan also led the army. Along with Diaz were the dogmen and Ima. Ima accompanied Diaz as a liaison. Their combat readiness amounted to 12 warriors, including Diaz and Klouse. Diaz equipped all the warriors with the necessary equipment. He also prepared the necessary materials and equipment. Klouse notes that Diana's warriors are very numerous. He thinks that they should have asked for reinforcements or accepted Aruna's help. Diaz said that Aruna had an important duty in hiding the village. She needed to protect the village. Klouse agrees. But Klouse would still like to have Eldan on their side. Diaz reports that he asked Eldan to follow the royal order. He says that Eldan has sent inside information and letters containing betrayal many times, but he is still not sure that Eldan is a traitor. So Diaz assumed that Eldan's army was not a fighting force. He responded by prioritizing protection for himself and his people. But he is not sure if Eldan read it correctly. Klouse says he understands. He asks if the plan is moving forward as they discussed. Diaz replies that they are acting according to an agreed-upon plan. He begins to explain their plan. The man was tense. He considered it an advantage that the grave dogs could pinpoint the enemy's location, but he was still unsure whether the plan would work. If the plan fails, Diaz will make a lone attack on Bayarse behind enemy lines, but he decided to hide it from everyone else. The man could have rebuilt the simple yurts and let the enemies pass by as he moved from place to place across the plain. But that choice meant abandoning the twins. The man noticed that thanks to his care, the girls stopped crying at night because of their parents. He understood that this was very important for them. The man imagined the girls in case the fields were destroyed. He tightened his grip on his weapon and decided that he would definitely protect them. Ima turned to Diaz and pointed to the bell that the enemies had. The man explains that this is a war bell that gives instructions during battle. He says it was used before, but now he considers it an antique. The bell starts ringing. Ima covers her ears. Klouse and Diaz's eyes widen. The bell continues to ring. Diaz says that the continuous blow is a signal for an all-army attack. He asks AIMA to run out when the sound stops. Diaz and Klouse look at the enemy in surprise as the bell stops ringing. The man wonders when the attack will come, not the advance. He asks what Diana is planning. Diana and her troops got ready. Diaz also gave the command to all warriors to stand in a fighting stance. He reports that he does not understand the actions of the opponents, but decides to look at them according to the circumstances. He squeezes his weapon tighter. The bell rings and the battle begins. Diaz gives the command to everyone to get ready. Diana's army also stood in a fighting stance. There were 4 troops on Diana's field at once. Everyone stood in anticipation. Diaz raised his axe. Diana's warriors ran forward. Diaz looked at them menacingly. The warriors stopped and began to look at each other. Klouse and Diaz didn't understand why the warriors stopped. Diaz still couldn't understand what was happening. Klouse notices that Diana's escorts ran to the left and right flanks. Diaz can't figure out what this strategy is. He wonders what Diana might have come up with. At this time, Camelot served tea to Eldan. The man thanked the servant. A knight ran up to them and asked what they were doing. Eldan smiles and says it's time for tea. The knight looks at Eldan, dumbfounded. Eldan claims that this is very important. Since his father bequeathed to him not to miss tea time, that is why he considered it more important. The knight asks if Eldan really intends to go against the king's orders. Eldan says he is following orders. He says Diana should not forget that he has cooperated with her more than enough. Eldan believes that the elite around her will be enough. He reminded them that there are only 2 opponents. Eldan sets his conditions and continues drinking tea. He finishes it and asks the servant to bring more. Kamalas obeys his lord. One of the warriors rubbed the back of his head and thought that something strange was happening, since no one took on this task even though they paid a lot. The man didn't expect them to fight Diaz, he wasn't going to rush. Then the man turned around in order to retreat. His warriors ask the man if he is sure. The man says they cannot defeat Diaz. The man reminds them that Diaz is a good man who protected their country. He also did not understand why Duke Kasdex's army did not move either. He says that those who want to fight can stay. Everyone obeys the captain and leaves. A man runs up to the captain and asks what they are doing. The captain returns the advance and says goodbye. The man asks why they are leaving. Diaz looks through the telescope and says that the mercenaries also retreated for some reason. He also noticed that Eldan is stalling for time. He believes that Diana's plan has failed. Diaz noticed that only Diana's soldiers were heading towards them. He assesses them and believes that their opponents would be better off retreating. Diaz says they need to change the plan. He explains what they will do. Klouse smiles. Diaz asks Ima to cover her ears for a moment. The man takes a deep breath. Diaz screams very loudly. The knights stop. Aruna heard the battle cry and thought it was good. Aruna tells the dog people that they need to support Diaz. All the dog people agree. At this time, a grandmother was sitting in one of the yurts. She was laying out stones on the floor, and then she walked out of the yurt onto the street, where everyone greeted her. They asked how everything went. The old woman replied that everything was fine. Everyone was happy. At this time, Eldan was watching through binoculars. He asked his servant to evaluate the fighting style of Klouse and Diaz. The man said that Diaz is physically strong. About Klouse, he said that he supports Diaz and covers for him. The man was also amazed by the active participation of the small species. He did not expect that the small species would be able to fight, as they were clumsy. Eldan thought that they had underestimated the small species in vain. At this time, Klouse continued to fight. He remembered the promise that Canis had made. At this moment, a knight swung at him. Diaz managed to warn Klouse, and he dodges. Klouse parries the knight's attack and turns to Diaz. The man points out that there is a snake under his feet. Klouse does notice the snake. Diaz says it was very dangerous. He also says they are almost done with Diana's soldiers, but they need to remain vigilant. Diana watched the fight. She was very angry. She didn't understand why they weren't listening to her. She screamed and waved her scepter. Suddenly, an arrow flew at the girl, and the scepter fell from her hands. The girl jumped off her horse and tried to understand where the arrow came from. At this time, Aruna was shooting her bow. There were dog people next to her, who asked her about Diana. The girl turned to the dog people and asked them to take the scepter and Diana's horse. She decided to drive the woman off the plain. The girl gave the dog people an order and stroked their heads. Aruna ran forward. She decided to scare Diana so that she would not do such things again. Diana tried to run into the forest. Suddenly, an arrow hit the tree in front of her. Diana stopped for only a second and continued running. At that moment, Aruna thought that it would be safer to deal with Diana. She pulled the bowstring and shot the arrow again, but missed, as she was still unsure. Suddenly, Diana was caught by other people. Aruna looked at them, dumbfounded. The man who captured Diana says he didn't expect to meet his target in the woods. They quickly knocked the girl unconscious. Then the man looked at his watch and said they were late. One of the mercenaries says they were late because of the same man. Suddenly, an arrow flies towards them. The mercenaries take out their weapons and try to figure out who attacked them. The man holds Diana and suggests that she is still being pursued by Diaz's group. He asks the attacker to wait and tried to convince him that he and Diaz are friends. He says that they came on the orders of Diaz's apprentice. The man picks up the bag and says that they came on Richard's orders. He asks not to attack their squad anymore. He was still trying to convince the attacker. When the man thought the attack was over, an arrow flew into his bag of money. The bag fell. The man says he understands everything. He says they will leave the money, but take Diana. Aruna watches as the mercenaries run away. She picks up the bag and assumes that the man is telling the truth after all. She managed to conduct an assessment of souls. Aruna decides to go back and tell Diaz about Diana. She assumes that Diaz is tired, so she plans to cook him something. The girl began to think about how to please Diaz. She began to think about massage and blush because of her fantasies about Diaz. The girl ran back happily. At this time, Diana's knight was shouting that he had lost, so he surrendered and asked for mercy. Diaz said that there were many reasons for their defeat, but the main reason was that they were very tired when they got here because of the heavy equipment. Klouse raised his spear and ordered everyone to give a victory cry, because they defeated the enemy troops. It seemed that they could only take all the enemy soldiers' weapons and will to fight. The mercenaries on the left flank retreated. He does not understand why they came. Diaz's troops have suffered no casualties and appear to be unharmed. The enemy soldiers are likely to have many wounded, but no deaths. Diaz realizes that the leader, Diana, was missed, so he was unable to scold her. Suddenly, something bit Diaz on the scalp. The attacker said that if Diaz did not want to kill the enemy, he did not have to. He could have used wolf pits as planned, but Diaz decided to fight head-on.
If Diaz had butted in,
Who would then take command? How could a man survive a war with such a method of fighting? Diaz said they had a comrade who was trusted with command and minor details. Suddenly, Diaz called Eldan. The man was riding a horse and said that they had come to discuss the surrender and release of prisoners of war. Eldan asked something about the discussion. The man asked Eldan what he meant by surrender. Eldan said that, this time, they, leading an army, invaded Diaz's territory without permission. This is an act of aggression, crossing the border, as provided for by the law of the kingdom. Now that Diana has disappeared, the reliability of the royal order is shaken. They must surrender to Diaz immediately and make peace. Diaz asks what they can talk about, since there is no need to make peace. Diaz's assistant says he thinks Eldan is making an excuse when he talks about surrender and reconciliation. Eldan nods in response. Diaz says, agreeing that in that case he accepts the reconciliation. This time especially grateful, do as he pleases, because he does not object. Eldan said he was grateful for Diaz's generous actions, regarding the general circumstances, as Ima said. Next, he plans to meet with His Majesty. Perhaps this will be a measured coin. Diaz said that Eldan was surprising them again by talking about negotiations with the king. He was asking how reconciliation with him would be a measured coin. Eldan said that she did not know that yet. He simply wanted to increase the number of trump cards in his hand. According to Eldan, this time the king is also responsible. The royal seal, something that should never be let out of hands, was stolen. They got into a situation where a royal document is being forged. In addition, the problem is that they failed to stop Diana from escaping, and as a result, they were involved in an unwanted conflict. Therefore, as Diaz said, he is a victim of the king's mistake. It seems that Eldan plans to take full advantage of this situation. After that, they talked about compensation. Diaz said that the conversation was difficult, but Eldan can present his name in any way, doing what is necessary. If Diaz can help with anything else, feel free to speak up. Eldan thanked Diaz. Suddenly, Eldan and Diaz's assistant felt something. Someone told Diaz that he had done a great job. It was Aruna. The girl said that this was truly worthy courage. For breakfast, she mixed the medicinal herbs with the arousal effect that she received from the leader. It seemed that they were useful. Diaz asked about herbs with a stimulating effect. Diaz remembered the chieftain's words, and then realized that after the battle, he also found it strange that everyone was less tired. When he asked why Aruna was using medicinal herbs to conceive a child at this time, the girl replied that she had heard from Moru that medicinal herbs gave special energy. When Aruna was forced to take care of Diaz, Mora said that there would come a time when the bickering would develop into some kind of relationship between him and the girl. Regarding this incident, the man will definitely file a complaint with Mora later. Then the girl said that when she was chasing Diana, she met a man. They said that they were carrying out orders from Richard, who was raised as a child by Diaz. They also said that this Richard would take care of this woman. This money was also prepared by Richard for Diaz. He is truly a very caring and well-mannered child. Diaz remembers Richard and whether there was such a child at all. Diaz had a lot of things he wanted to ask Aruna, but they had finished with what they had to do, so they decided to part ways today. Having handed over the prisoners of war to Eldan and received various things under the pretext of compensation, they slowly returned home to the village of Eluk. Suddenly, Diaz notices the dogs. Aruna said that they are the Women's Society of Eluk Village. so she asked them to collect the spoils of the battlefield. The Eluk Village Women's Society was probably created by Aruna and the dog-human housewives. He thought it was just a gathering of good friends, but it seemed like everyone in the Women's Society had undergone some sort of combat training under Aruna. Diaz thought he was telling Aruna to protect the village, so he said Aruna could have informed him about it beforehand. Aruna replied that she had spoken about it, but Diaz had not listened attentively. Diaz was surprised and apologized to the girl. Suddenly, Diaz notices a sorority member carrying an interesting staff in his mouth. He calls the sorority member and asks her to show him the staff. Diaz takes the staff in his hands. Aruna asks what it is. Diaz replies that this gem shows signs of being filled with magical power. Maybe put some magic into it to test it. Aruna tried to put magic into the staff but realized that nothing was happening, as if it was just an ordinary stone. Diaz takes the staff in his hands and doesn't understand what he felt. It's like that strange feeling when he holds a battle axe in his hands, or it's because Aruna filled him with magical power. The man tries to concentrate and suddenly the snake's eyes on the staff start to glow. The next moment, magic bursts out of the staff, which turns into a huge flame that bursts out of the staff. Aruna said that maybe the current power is the same as his axe. Klouse and Diaz's assistant started asking about the fire pillar and what Diaz did. Aruna asked that Diaz could control fire. She hoped that they had not done any imprecise work. She takes the staff from him and says that this staff will be hers for now. After some time, they return home. Sene and Aisheng meet Diaz, and Klouse meets his beloved Canis. Thus ends the war between Diaz's village and Diana. Afterwards, they all conducted various tests of the staff's power and Diaz's power, but eventually found out that only Diaz could use this staff. If Diaz puts in a little effort, as if they were repairing a battle axe, fire will appear, but for some reason he couldn't explain it clearly to everyone. In the end, Aruna puts magic power into the staff, and Diaz releases fire. Seni said that the staff is amazing and lights fires instantly. Aiken said that it is easier than flint. Diaz decides to use the staff to light fires in the village. A month later, summer was approaching. The royal capital was bustling. The main topic was the great criminal Diana, who had stolen the royal seal and was plotting a rebellion. Richard, the first prince, immediately discovered this plot and arrested Diana. Eldan, successor of Duke Kasdex, hero of the West. Thanks to Eldan's report, the stolen rewards for the hero who saved the country were discovered, and 4 people of the second Prince of Maze were put in a difficult situation. Later, Diana, having incurred the king's wrath, was disinherited. Although she escaped execution, it was decided that she would be imprisoned in the temple. With this deal, Richard made a huge leap forward. He gained the deepest trust of the king and the remnants of Diana's faction, including those who had fled from Mies, becoming the largest faction in the kingdom. Eldan brought a lot of information, including cases of accusations and some Western special products. Thus, he successfully gained the deep trust of the king and received the title, inheriting the territory. He was also allowed to take a new surname. In addition, as an apology for the incident with Diana, he personally received special concessions from the king in the form of a 3-year exemption from taxes. The Duke of Kasdex, Eldan, became widely known. After some time, Richard left the room. His people began to ask why Richard was in a bad mood again. In this incident, Richard is the only winner. The man replied that Richard said that the current winner is the Duke of Kasdex. Where Richard supposedly wins, in fact, it is also a trick of the Duke of Kasdex. The 3-year tax exemption is also a problem. Not only does this undermine the huge tax revenues from the Kasdex territories that control the western trading regions, but it will also allow Duke Kasdex to build up too much power while he is not paying his taxes. Furthermore, Duke Kasdex told the audience that he supported the next person to the throne, Richard. This put Richard in a position where he could not interfere indiscreetly with Duke Kasdex's affairs. You can't openly attack your own supporters, and in this situation it will be difficult to force His Majesty to cancel the tax exemption. Richard said that he could not forgive himself for the fact that everything was done according to the Duke's intentions. There were also rumors of Diaz, the hero who saved the country, which spread throughout the kingdom. It was said that Diaz was banished to the cursed land without a penny, but he broke the curse with the power of the holy axe. He single-handedly defeated the Earth Dragon, led more than 100 people to create a personal city, and married an incomparable beauty. The king is also determined to give Diaz from the orphanage the title of Duke, and a new surname, and also an order to exempt him from taxes. At first, it seemed like a lie, but then Eldan, who was in the royal capital, admitted that it was the truth. Numerous rumors spread throughout every region of the kingdom of Sans-Serif. To the west, to the plain as far as Diaz, it spread everywhere, influencing many places and people. After a while, Aruna tells Diaz that a lot has happened, but that everything has finally calmed down. Diaz agrees and says that they need to prepare for the summer. It will be very difficult. He says that he will start immediately tomorrow. Then Aruna looked at the sleeping twins and said that she could help Diaz relax. The girl suggests that the man lie down on his stomach. Diaz thanks Aruna. The girl approaches the man and says that he can rely on her at any time. She will support him with all her might. The man thanks Aruna. The girl suggests that the man rest today, because she does not want fatigue to affect tomorrow. Diaz asks if Aruna really thinks so. Some time ago, when Diaz and the others confronted Diana, Francis and Francois went west of the village of Eluk. No one understood what happened to them, because they are usually so timid and cautious. Suddenly, Francis and Francois began to bleat. Human dogs can talk to Francis and Francois, but at this moment they could not understand the meaning of their words. Francis and Francois continued talking and calling someone. Suddenly, a very loud sound was heard. The dogmen were surprised and thought that this voice seemed to come from the depths of the earth. It sounded as if it was saying that it was still early and not enough. The dogman told Francis and Francois that it was time for them to return home, and then asked whose voice it was. They replied that they needed to return to the village, and then thanked the dogmen for accompanying them. For Masti's group, this was a mysterious event. Later, they would hear the joyful news of Diaz's team's victory, and they forgot all about it. The next morning, Aruna asks Aisha if she still really doesn't like wearing a saddle. Diaz thinks that Diana used to ride this horse. In the old language, there is a word called Aisha, which means moon-haired horse. Aruna named Diana's horse this, and she cherishes it. They took her in after the battle, but she seems to really dislike being ridden. She wasn't considered for riding, just cared for. Aruna said that the horse becomes completely attached to the previous owner. This often happens. Instead of forcing, it is better to wait until the horse opens up to her. Suddenly, Aruna's horn glowed. Aruna's horn glowed green. Something entered the perception of magic. Aruna placed around the village to notice who was approaching. Magic can only sense the presence of someone. Suddenly, someone ran up to Diaz and said that someone was approaching the village. Something shiny and wet. Diaz tried to calm the dogman down. The dogman said the intruder also had a big mouth. Diaz suggested it might be Paijin. Aruna agreed. Paijin is a frog merchant and a former visitor to the village. I'm sure he asked him to advertise the recruitment and ordered the next batch. Diaz was curious that he had collected those willing to move. The frog arrived and said that there were many rumors about Diaz, and he brought the goods they ordered. He introduced himself as Paijin Do's younger brother and said that his name was Paijin Rei. On behalf of his older brother, he delivered the goods Diaz ordered. Diaz was surprised. Aruna said that it was true. If you look closely, the voice and clothes are different. It looks like it, but it's not Page Do. The frogman said that Paijin Seed is a merchant family that has made a huge fortune by using both water and land transportation as a market. He is one of the 7 sons of the 8th head of the Paijin Octaido family. Diaz asked what happened to Paijin Do. Paijin Rei said that he heard that Paijin Do lost something important during trading and was suspended from work, so this time he is as a representative. He asks if they can talk about recruiting people, Diaz's first assignment. There is no one in the Beastmen country who wants to leave their country and come here. That's the current situation. If they were servants, then as many as you like. However, Diaz does not like servants. Nevertheless, his brother tried all possible means as a result of their bloodless. Bloodless are those who are beastmen but have lost their beastness. Their appearance is very close to the human race, as well as their physical strength. The reason for this is not very clear. For some reason, a child with weak blood is suddenly born. Then, after several generations, the beast's blood disappears completely. The current king of beasts shows deep love for the bloodless. However, the previous kings of beasts had a completely different view on this. The bloodless were not treated very well. There are few who want to escape from the land of the beastmen, but that does not mean that they want to go to the kingdom of Sans-Serif with a strong sense of discrimination. But Diaz married a half-human wife, and he welcomes the abandoned with open arms, and if necessary, they can return to their country. There are several who are willing to move to this plane, so before he brought the bloodless, he thought he'd first make sure Diaz didn't mind the bloodless. Diaz thought he'd certainly like to have them. Diaz says that there is actually a lord in the neighboring territory who works hard to free and protect the half-humans and half-beasts from their servitude. He hasn't seen it himself, but judging by the goods he has, he seems quite wealthy. The newcomers can come to him, but maybe they want to go there too. Anyone who has had a hard time so far, he thinks, will be better off living under the rich Eldan. Paige is surprised and says he wishes Diaz had told him about this a little earlier. This could be a new trade. He asks if Diaz can establish a trade route. Diaz thinks the brothers are very similar. Peijin apologizes and says he got excited. He suggests they start trading. Peijin says he can start with a mother-of-pearl vessel, then shows him a wooden box with inlay. Diaz asks Peijin to stop. As such, things are not for him. Aruna puts down a bag of coins and says that they will buy as much as they can with all this gold. They will see if they can find suitable things. Diaz asks Aruna if he is sure. Sure, beautiful pieces of art, but something like that is not necessary for life. Aruna says that just having gold will not fill the belly. If the goods are not bought, the merchant will stop trading. Then they can let him earn. It is better to show that they are valuable customers, so he can come to trade again. There are enough savings, there will be no problems. Diaz replied that the unused art pieces could be sold to someone else. He decides to leave it all to Aruna. Peijin said that with such a budget they can buy many goods. Although there is not much left, he can offer necklaces and a very expensive stone that will suit the lady. Aruna realizes that Paige is lying. She says that there is no need for jokes because with this budget she will take additional dried and smoked fish, so she asks Paige to pack all the boxes. Also, the gem in the necklace appears to be fake, so she asks for the real thing. As a bonus, Paige can throw in a barrel of wine. Paige says he'll go broke if he does, so he suggests Aruna discuss the price again. Diaz thinks that, as expected of Aruna, she'll take care of everything and it looks good. Then the dogman asked the geese what had happened to them and how they had ended up in this place. One of the geese pinched the dogman's paw and he jumped up and opened their cage. The geese chased the dogman, who did not understand why they were chasing and pursuing her. Suddenly Maya came up and asked what was going on, because these geese were very cheerful. The food can be vegetable scraps from cooking. They grow quickly. In 6 months they will become adults. Sometimes they live from 20 to 50 years. They are very attached to their owners, but at the same time very cautious and aggressive. If a thief approaches the house, the geese begin to quack loudly, and if harmful animals approach the field, the geese chase them away, plucking them with their beaks, and work as guard dogs. You can get eggs, meat, feathers, and many other things from them. The geese are also called birds of grace. They are well fed and have beautiful shiny beaks. The feathers and legs look healthy. Diaz tells Paige and Aruna that he would like to buy these geese. Paige starts counting and says that's the price for 6 geese, and he can take 20% off that. Diaz realizes that they're probably still negotiating. Paige then tells Aruna that he actually has some merchandise on hold. Aruna asks about the merchandise. Paige says that he heard that Diaz doesn't have an heir yet. Actually, he only presents this item to nobles, but this time is special, so he will offer it to the lady. It is a little expensive, but a very good product. He shows a certain type of clothing. Aruna asks what it is. Paige explains that this outfit is worn for a spell. It is said that if the spouse wears this costume, she will immediately receive an heir. Aruna asks how one can have a child with such a thing, since it is just strings. Paige says he does not know, but it has a very strong effect on human nobles. Aruna asks Paige to remove it. After a while, the number of goods increased. Diaz thought that it seemed that the long negotiating battle was finally over. It seemed that the price had been reduced. but a lot of unnecessary things had been added. The result was a draw, but only Diaz thought so, while Aruna and Paige did not. Thanks to the soul evaluation, Aruna successfully negotiated. Paige sold more than half of his goods, including expensive art pieces. He thinks that both of them got a reasonable profit without any losses. But Paige tried to sell a low-quality product at an inflated price, and Aruna saw through it. Still, she didn't blame him for it, nor was it an excuse to lower the price. As Diaz had said earlier, Paige had made a profit. Aruna was excellent. In the end, they received food, household goods, various artistic items, and 6 geese, as well as wine as expected from Aruna. The men then take everything to the warehouse. Aruna decides to help out too, and then discovers a strange group of outfits. She looks at the clothes and thinks there are dancer styles, warrior styles, waitress styles, and male versions. Aruna imagines herself in these outfits and then realizes that she is thinking of something strange, because there are little twins in the house. Then she sees the men's outfits and starts looking at them. Paige has almost sold all of these outfits and thinks that one more push, and he will definitely sell them all. Then they put all their things away. Diaz thanked everyone for their help. Then he noticed Aruna's red face and asked her what had happened. The girl became embarrassed and said that it was not like that at all. Paige tells Diaz that they are leaving and asks if the man has any requests for the next trade. Diaz says that next time, he wants Paige to bring a lot of goods suitable for dog people. They have some gold and silver coins and he wants them to use them. Paige said he understood everything and asked Diaz to rely on him. Then Paige calls Aruna and says that next time, he will bring her something better. Aruna blushes and says that she does not need it. Then, when Paige left, they had a lot of work to do. They had to prepare a place to keep the geese. First, they would build a small barn. They would dig a ditch from the river and make a small watering hole near the barn. He thinks they can do without it, but he's heard they grow better with it, so he thinks they should make it. Then the dog people run to Diaz and say that they helped Maya's grandmother and the others. Diaz thanks them for their help. Diaz said they were all dirty, so he asked what they were doing. Maya said she asked them to work for the geese. The other women thanked Diaz for buying such good geese. By the looks of them, they will have a couple more birds. They did everything that was needed. The materials for the coop came from an unused Maya barn. They did it all without Diaz's permission, but it was all necessary, so it wasn't a problem. Diaz thanked everyone for their help and said they had done a great job. He then remembered that he had not yet rewarded the dogmen for fighting Diana. He says he will give everyone a medal as a memento of the victory. Not just those who fought, but everyone who defended their village. More specifically, he is going to give it to everyone in Eluk village, so he asks everyone to gather in the square. After a while, everyone was gathered in the square. Diaz says that he is very grateful to the dog people in the battle against Diana. He thanks everyone and says that now everyone will receive a gold coin as a reward. Those who were on the battlefield, 2 coins, and those who were not on the battlefield, 1. The children's portion will go to the parents. Everyone was happy, and soon, Diaz and Aruna began to hand out coins to everyone. Finally, Diaz finished distributing the coins. Suddenly, the dogman addressed him. Diaz asked what had happened. The dogman asked if he could make a hole in the gold coin. Diaz asked about the hole. Then the other dogmen ran up to him and said that they wanted to make a hole too. Diaz asked why they wanted to make a hole in a gold coin. He didn't say they couldn't, but he wanted to hear the reason first. They told him that when he made a hole so that they could pass a string through it, after threading the string, they would put it around their neck. The reward they received from Diaz, they want them to always have with them. Diaz asks that it is a gold coin, so it is money. He hands it to them, hoping they will use it to buy what they want. The dog people say that they do not want it. Diaz wondered how it was that they gave them gold and silver coins as a reward for their daily work, but they used the coins they received to decorate the inside of the yurts. He thought it was an act of joy as a reward for long-awaited work, but it seems Diaz was wrong. For them, it's a precious souvenir, or rather, it's more like a keepsake. He would let them do what they want, but he already asked Paige for dog-human products. If they don't use money as money, that will be a problem. Diaz asked the dogman if he really had a special fondness for gold and silver. The dogman replied that he thought they were beautiful and shiny, but he had no particular passion for them. Diaz asked if there was any meaning to this reward from him then. The dogman replies that there is a point, because it is a joyful reward and memories. Diaz says that then why not give him a good, memorable reward, and they use gold as gold. The dogman agreed and said that this would be the best reward. Diaz thought that although he said so, he did not know what would be better to prepare. A better reward than gold, and he would have to prepare about 100. Aruna says that perhaps, for example, fangs and bones of animals obtained by Diaz himself during a hunt would be suitable. She asks the dogman if he would be happy if a necklace crafted by Diaz's hands became his reward. Everyone happily said they would be very happy about that. Aruna said that was all for today. Once the necklaces were ready, Diaz would give them to each of the dog people. They agreed. Diaz thanked Aruna for the good offer. Thanks to this, everyone was able to return to work. Aruna says that although the necklace is a reward, she asks if the man will give her something. Diaz says he will make one for Aruna. Diaz then notices Sanai and Aiken, as well as Ima. He asks if they were at the meeting place all this time. Ima replies that she was showing the twins how to practice. Sanai and Aiken said they wanted necklaces too. Diaz says Aruna was talking about animals, probably black buffalo. He also says the girls know them well and eat them well. He asks if they want necklaces made from leftovers. Sanai and Aiken say they don't need such necklaces. Diaz thinks it's not very good to make such a necklace as a reward, but they don't have any other suitable materials. Aruna said that a man can simply spend time making them, putting his feelings into it. Human dogs do not want something valuable, but something in the form of Diaz's feelings, which means that their attitude towards gold coins is obvious. Diaz must carefully scrape each piece with care, putting feelings into it. He may insert a little gemstone into it to make it look better. Aruna had some jewelry left, so she could share it with the man. Diaz thought he didn't know if he could do it well. Aruna told Diaz not to worry, because fine work is her strong point. Even if he is unskilled, she will show the man how to do it correctly, so he will learn quickly. Diaz thanks the girl, but he's been bothered by it for a long time, so people can easily understand him. He hasn't said anything yet, but the girl has read what he's thinking. Maybe the girl is using the same negotiating skills on him that Paige did. Everyone starts smiling sweetly. Diaz felt embarrassed and thought that now he understood that he also knew what they were all thinking. After some time, Diaz carefully creates necklaces. Diaz finished making the necklace and said that it turned out better than he thought. Suddenly, Aruna appears and asks the man if he can be distracted. Diaz says he is finally done. He gives her the necklace and asks her what she thinks of his progress. Aruna puts the necklace on her neck and says that this is a good job and it will make the dog people happy. Diaz said it took him 3 days to make one necklace. At this rate, he wonders how many days it will take to finish making them all. Aruna said that once he had done something like that, he could do it faster. No need to rush, just take it step by step. And when he did that, he suddenly realized that he had finished it. Diaz said that, as Aruna said, she would continue slowly. Then Diaz asked what happened, because the girl wanted to say something. Aruna remembers this. Aruna said that while Diaz was working on it, they were thinking about what they could do on their end, and decided to make a kamadaba if the man was okay with it. A kamadaba is a cooking area with several stoves next to each other. Now they cook food on each stove in the yurt. With so many people, it has become a bit crowded, and it is a bit of a hassle to carry all the household utensils and ingredients back and forth. Then Ima suggested building a place with ovens and a bread oven made by Klouse. They would make a well and a place for washing. She also says that they will make a roof covering the whole place with ovens. If there will be such a place with ovens, they will be able to cook different dishes faster than now. She asks what Diaz thinks. Diaz thinks it looks like they want to cook, eat on site with ovens. He says he doesn't mind, but if they are going to build ovens under the roofs, what about the materials? Aruna thinks they could ask Kamalos. If they could buy a roof or two for the stables, that should be enough. Diaz says that the next time Jalant comes, he'll write a letter about it.
Aruna says everything is fine.
Candace is coming home soon, so she asked her to pass on the message, Diaz says she is leaving already. Canis remained in Eluk village to see if the human dogs could adapt to life here, but judging by the way they have been acting lately, she believes that all is well. Aruna replies that by the time Canis returns here, there will still be much work to do, such as expanding Klause's yurt, but he thinks Klouse himself will do his best. She tells Diaz to keep it up. Diaz asks if Canis will really come back here again, and why they are talking about Klause's yurt. The girl is surprised and asks what she means by why. She asks if Diaz hasn't noticed. She says the two have been on good terms for a long time. Canis returns to his hometown to tell his father. Diaz was very surprised, and began to ask how long Klouse and Canis had such a relationship. Aruna asks if the man really didn't notice. She asks if they didn't exchange friendly feelings during the meal. Suddenly, Diaz remembers the delicious meal at that moment. Then he asks if Canis will really live here with Klouse. Aruna says that she was told that they will get married when they are ready. If they are so close, will they be blessed with a child soon? Aruna said Diaz will ask them for details. Diaz thought he was very happy for the two. Suddenly, they heard excited cries that Aruna was very lucky and took the first finished product. Aruna said that she liked this product very much. At this time, Klouse was shouting in his yurt and saying that something bad had happened, because he did not know what would be the best engagement gift. After a while, Diaz was sitting in his yurt making necklaces. He says he's pretty good at making necklaces. As Aruna said, making one at a time gives him the knack. Suddenly he notices Sine and Ihan who are watching him from afar. Diaz realizes that the girls also want a necklace. He says that he will make necklaces for them too, so they should not worry. The girls opened the door and ran away. Diaz shouted at them that if they open the doors, they should close them too. Diaz had to close the door. Suddenly, Klouse burst in, saying that he wanted to discuss something with him and then asking if he had time. Klouse asked the boy to calm down, and then ask what was wrong. After a while, Diaz asks if Klouse is really at a loss for what engagement gift to give Canis's parents. Klouse agrees and says that Canis said there was no need for it, but still thinks they need to prepare better. Klouse asks if Diaz really gave an engagement gift to Aruna's parents too. He asks what the man gave the girl. Diaz said that in his case, he was in a situation where he was forced to marry, he gave the Earth Dragon materials. Klouse was surprised and asked what the reaction was from Aruna's parents. Diaz replied that they were very happy. According to Moru, it could have been 30 black buffaloes or something close. 30 black bulls. If that's it, he could handle it. Diaz said the problem is their culture and values. They don't know if they will be happy if they hand over the black buffalo. The man says he handed over some gold coins. She asks if it would be better to use them and buy some suitable item as a gift. Klouse says that he has no awareness at all that he got them by his own efforts. He was able to get fame and is satisfied. What he wants to give most is what he gets with his own efforts. After hearing Diaz's story, he also wants to become like him and Aruna, so he wants to give the fruits of hunting. Diaz thought that hunting the Earth Dragon was dangerous. He did not know if they would be happy with the meat of the black buffalo. Then Diaz remembers the sheep, which are very soft to the touch and fluffy. First, you need to hunt black buffalo. After the hunt, you need to take the black buffalo to the Oni village and exchange it for Mia cloth. Klouse will be able to give this Mia fabric as an engagement gift. Good quality fabric has many uses. He does not think there will be any problems with this. Kamalos was very impressed with the quality of the Mia fabric. He is sure that the girl's parents will be pleased. Klouse agrees and says that it is indirect, but you can say that it is the result of hunting. It is also a local specialty. It would be nice to learn the secrets of hunting them too. Diaz said he didn't think his advice on methods would help. Klouse agrees and says that these are inhuman methods. He will learn how to fight from them. So the young man thanks Diaz. 5 days later, Diaz was still making jewelry. The man said that once he mastered the techniques, it went faster. Another 2 or 3 days, and he would definitely be finished. Suddenly, he was interrupted by Aruna, who informed him that Canis had returned. She apologized to the man for disturbing him, but he had heard that there was a report, so he was willing to listen. The girl said that she had just returned and also received permission from her parents, and from today on, as a resident of this place and as a member of Klause's family, she would try her best. She asks him to take care of him. Diaz replies that the girl should take care of them as well. He thinks that she has been through a lot, but he wants her and Klouse to try. The girl agrees. Then Aruna asks if there shouldn't be a report. The girl remembers that she has a report. She says that Eldan and Kamalos were absent because they went to the royal capital. Her father is now acting as a deputy lord. Along with the announcement of the wedding, she also asked for the construction of a place with ovens. They will send the materials and other supplies later with the artisans. Due to these circumstances, her father will not be able to leave the area, so only her mother will be present at the wedding. Instead, she and Klouse will go to greet them, so her father will hold a banquet, and she will probably stay for a few days, so she asks Diaz to take care of her. Diaz thought that Klouse's wedding is still far away.
Until the black buffalo hunt was over,
They couldn't hold the ceremony. Then Diaz thought they were forgetting something important. Then the man asked when they were leaving. The girl answered that she was about to leave right now. Diaz and Aruna were very surprised. The girl asked if it was possible that Klouse was about to go somewhere, right now. Diaz said that the thing is that Klouse hunts black buffalo day after day, but in the last 5 days he has only killed 2 black buffalo, so things are not going well. With the help of the Matabi powder, they should have been easy to hunt, but it seems that Klouse is setting himself up to hunt with his own forces, and that's why they ended up in this situation. He heard the sorority and Masti say they wanted to help him, but he said he wanted to prepare the engagement gift himself at any cost. Klouse stubbornly stood his ground, without using Matabi powder. Without the help of human dogs, he runs alone on this wide plain, searching. He caught 2 buffaloes without wounds. In this way, one can say he did enough. The girl became curious about what Klouse was doing. She was happy with the engagement gift, but above all, the power of the relationship that was created is Klouse's power. You can openly ask for help. Diaz asks Canis what she is going to do. Canas said that she would certainly hit her husband's cheeks with her hand when he did something stupid and bring him to his senses. She feels joy, but if she gets hurt or dies, Klouse doesn't understand how sad she would be. Her mother said that this is the best remedy when dealing with such people. Her father suffered from this many times too. After a while, Canis says goodbye to Diaz and Aruna. Suddenly, Aruna starts waving. Diaz asks the girl what she is doing. Aruna replied that she just thought that if something were to happen, she, as a wife, should do it properly. Diaz asks the girl to be more restrained. Aruna asks if Diaz really won't tell her not to do it. Diaz said that if he did something that would earn him a slap from Aruna, then he deserved it. He would have no choice but to take it. Then Aruna smiled and asked if Diaz had prepared a gift for Klouse and Canis. The women were preparing the festive things and preparing the banquet. Diaz said that everything was fine, and he would definitely prepare a gift for the ceremony. He hadn't figured out what to give yet. Aruna suddenly began to practice the attack. Diaz thought that he would prepare a thing for congratulations at any cost, and these were incredible strikes. After Klouse received from Canis, he stopped being strangely stubborn. He asked for help from the dog people and used the Matabi powder. Sometimes he began to hunt with Canis. As a result, he was able to achieve good results. In just 3 days, he had collected enough black buffalo. Soon after, Klouse and the others set out for the neighboring territory. As he saw them off, Diaz was in a hurry inside. He had been so busy making necklaces that he hadn't prepared anything to congratulate them. He thought the black buffalo hunt would take longer. He hadn't expected them to finish in 3 days. Aruna and the others will have a real feast when they return. There is little time left. He thinks it would be best to discuss this with Aruna, but he told her it was all right. It was difficult to discuss it with her now. So Diaz went to Moore, the chief. Diaz said he didn't know who else to turn to. He also had something he wanted to tell her, so he would just say it. He told her about the field, about starting to trade with Pagan and the others, about the fight with Diana. He brought with him some trophies from that time and said to use them here as he saw fit. The chief replied that he was always a few steps ahead of his expectations. She decides to give some advice. Diaz can quickly prepare a wedding gift. How about high-quality Mia bed linen? Bed linen is always made in excess, so she can share it right now. She says it's a suitable gift for newlyweds. Diaz thinks of newlyweds, bedding, and they'll spend the night. Diaz says it's true, Klouse hasn't matured, so it might be appropriate. The chief said that at this rate, she didn't know when she would be able to hold Aruna's baby. They were husband and wife, but their lifestyle was that of a married couple, but unusually abstemious. She thought it would be a good idea to give them Diaz bedding. She will give him something embroidered with wishes for protection from illness and an easy birth, so he should take it with him. Diaz thanks the elder. After a while, Diaz says that this pillow has different patterns on the front and back, which is unusual. The chief says that she will give it to the man. Then Diaz notices the bag and says what it is. The chief replies that it is medicine for the birth of a child. A few days later, craftsmen and materials arrive from neighboring areas. It took about 3 days to build the place with the ovens and the roof. In addition, the craftsmen donated a goose barn and a toilet, as was possible. For the good work, Diaz paid everyone 10 gold coins and thanked them for their work, and also paid for the materials. Not knowing the market price, he was worried, but everything seemed to be fine. The next day, the artisans returned to the neighboring territory. Klouse returned with a cart full of souvenirs. At this point, the cart stopped at a small forest so that the people could have a snack. The man thanked the young man. He was a stranger, and he took him along on this journey and also made him some tea. The young man replied that their foster parent had raised them that way. They couldn't leave the old man to travel alone, and it seemed that they were all going to the same place. The girl said that she wanted to meet their father as soon as possible. At that moment, she remembered Klouse. After a while, Diaz asks Aruna how he looks, and he thinks he looks pretty weird. Aruna says everything is fine, and the man looks good, and then she asks the man to bend over a little. Then the girl straightens the man's hair. Today it is time for the wedding ceremony of Klouse and Canis. A man has been appointed as the host. This celebration mainly follows the form of the traditions of the kingdom, but combines the traditions of the dog people desired by Klouse. Also the traditions of the Oni tribe, desired by Canis. This celebration was unique to the village of Eluk. Canis's mother, Martel, was present at the wedding. Diaz began his speech by saying that people cannot live alone. That is why people find a way to become a family by loving someone who is not themselves. Today they celebrate the beginning of a new life for two people who want to create a family, to become such a family. For the wedding ceremony, it is very important to write the blessing left by the holy Dia. From early childhood, sacred scriptures were hammered into it so as not to make a mistake in any case. Even now, he can recite it without making a single mistake. Before, on the battlefield, he would recite the funeral scripture when comrades died, recite the scripture of glorification of life when he witnessed a birth, recite the scripture of blessing when someone tied the knot. Klouse seemed to remember that time and asked him to definitely perform the ceremony himself, so he will fulfill this duty. The teachings left by Saint Dia are not that complicated. Love others, love yourself and celebrate life, do not harm others, do not take others' things, do not enter others' territory, do not discriminate and oppress others for their origin, for their way of life. It is so obvious that they tend to forget these very important things. Saint Dia always stood by the Founder King. With the wisdom of the founder of the world, acquired in the Holy Land, he supported the great deeds of the Founder King. When the kingdom was founded and the people's lives were at peace, he built a temple, extolling the god, sleeping on the holy ground, and left behind many divine teachings. But he himself had no life partner or children, and then left the world. So today everyone has gathered here to eat, drink, dance to their heart's content, wishing a happy future for the two of them and blessing their new beginning. Now that the food is ready, they can enjoy these wonderful dishes together. Everyone started celebrating. Diaz decides to try the delicacy too. They put a lot of walnuts in this bread. He looks at Sine and Ihan and realizes that they made it. Diaz says that it is delicious, and this nut bread. The girls start making noise, and Diaz tells them that they are being rude. Sine and Ihan immediately calm down. Then someone tells Chef Marf and Sidori that it's time to start. The dog people start tossing Klouse around. This is a ritual of feasting, passed down from the dog people. A man who has found happiness in marriage is carried around the village, showing him off and wishing him happiness, and letting the whole village know that this man is already married. It is said that the purpose of this is to reduce troubles such as betrayal. It seems unnecessary since all the villagers are gathered in this place today, but a ritual is a ritual. Then the dog people started to pat Klouse. The lonely dog people who beat him are doing it to dispel jealousy towards the groom, towards their happy marriage. A kind of ritual. Searching for new meetings, telling others that he is lonely. Klouse was laughing really hard at this point. Everyone was having fun together. Klouse thanked everyone for celebrating the beginning of his new life. He promises that he and Canis will build a happy and loving family here in Eluk village. Canis screamed that she would try her best too. She promised that they would be happy together with Klouse. This is how the incredible wedding celebration went. Everyone was happy, laughing, singing, dancing, and eating delicious food. Suddenly, Aruna came up to Diaz and asked him to go with her. Diaz said that he was not a very good dancer. Aruna replied that she had not expected much from the beginning, so the man should not worry. The Oni tribe doesn't really have that kind of culture, but Maya and the others taught him a few things earlier, so it's a good opportunity, so she offers the man a little dance. Eventually, Diaz and Aruna start dancing. Diaz was very unsure of himself. Then Diaz noticed how everyone was dancing and Aruna was leaning against him. And so a little time passed. After dancing and eating, soon a calming atmosphere descended. An indescribably unique time, and such often happens at banquets. The time has come. Diaz brings the chest and tells the dogmen that he will give out necklaces as a reward for the battle, so they should gather. All the dog people ran to Diaz. The man told everyone to calm down, because there was enough for everyone, so they could stand up one by one. He actually wanted to hand them out as soon as they were ready, but everyone was busy, so he couldn't. Then Klouse and the others suggested handing them out during the feast. Then he hands out the pendants to everyone. Canis is surprised and asks if Diaz will really give her the jewelry too. Diaz says that he wants the girl to accept it unconditionally as a reminder that she has become a villager. Then Sine and Aiken approach Canis. They give the girl handkerchiefs with embroidery and say that this is a gift from them. The girl thanks the twins. And from the dog people she received beautiful stones found on the plain. From Francis and Francois, a shard of the precious Mia family. From Aima, a poem wishing happiness to the two of them. Klouse thanked everyone, and then saw the unusual rock salt. Diaz wonders if anything like this has been mined in the area. Diaz realizes that he too needs to be given a gift. Diaz is called Klouse and Canis. He hands them a gift and says that he wants them to accept this from him. Klouse was surprised and thanked Diaz for the bed linen. Aruna praised Diaz and said that the bed linen with embroidered wishes for offspring and prayers for an easy birth. Diaz also has a similar awareness. Maya praised Diaz. Aruna tells Diaz to take the bed linen to the yurt. The man agrees. Then he sees everyone gather and say that they should leave the rest to the two young ones. Diaz thought that just because they were talking about bed linens didn't mean they had to hurry before sunset. So today's celebration ended much earlier than planned. Although Diaz was supposed to host today's celebration, Aruna told Diaz to help everyone too. The man agrees. At this time, the men with the bear skins were in some cave. One of the men said that he had picked up the trail and realized where the village was. They say there is a rich man who made many purchases from the beast people, a mysterious village somewhere on the Neutros plain. Another man said that a carriage was recently spotted heading to the plain. If she was heading for the village, perhaps they could follow her trail. If they were wrong, they would attack the carriage. The strong had the right to rule over the weak. The man says he is Hugas and will rule over everyone. It seems a terrible enemy is approaching the village. The carriage was moving across the plain. The young man asked the girl if she was sure that this was the right place, since there was nothing but grass. The girl replied that it was west of Kasdex's territory, so that must be right. Suddenly, a dog man appeared in front of them. She asked who these people were. If they were bandits, she would bite them, so they should leave quickly. At this time, Diaz was sitting in the yurt. The season meets summer. Small changes have come into his life. Francois, who is expecting a baby in the fall, spends most of the day in the yurt. It's not that she's not feeling well, it's that she's in a period where she wants to do it anyway. Francis runs out into the meadow many times a day in search of soft grass. He chewed it, softened it, brought it to Francois, fed her, and ran off to the meadow again. According to Aruna, this is not a habit of the Maya. Probably Francis, in his own way, thinks about Francois. He also wants to be near Francois like this. After completing the daily training and a certain amount of work, she will soon give birth, and he began to spend even nights next to her. Suddenly, someone called Diaz. The dogman burst into the yurt. He told Diaz that people like bandits had arrived, bringing with them a lot of mea. She also said that there were only 6 Mies and that they seemed to be very friendly. Aruna told Diaz that they had to go, because Francois said that they had to go for their guests. She also said that anyone who is friends with the Mia will be fine, and she agrees with that. Besides, they brought 6 Mia at once. The Lord should meet them personally. They arrive at the plane and Diaz notices reinforcements. Suddenly, Diaz calls out for Aisa and Irai. Aruna asks if the two are Diaz's acquaintances. Aisu and Irai ran to Diaz and called him father and brother. Aruna was very surprised when the girl called him father. Diaz said they had both grown so much, and most importantly, they were fine. He asked how everyone else was doing. Irai said they were all healthy, running a store, getting married. Suddenly, a man in the form of a woman ran out of the cart. Diaz was happy to see Eric and said that he was with them. Diaz said that he looked healthy, so the man was very happy. Diaz asked Eric if he was okay and what was wrong. Eric asked Diaz to call Eri. Maya immediately ran to Eric. The man fell and said he was okay and then thanked the Maya. Diaz thought that Francois' recent judgments had been correct. All three were very kind-hearted children, although Eric's appearance was a little disturbing. Suddenly, Diaz notices another wagon and sees Uncle Ben, and then said that he is still alive, although the man thought he was already dead. Ben said that Diaz should not kill him willfully. He has become an adult, but he is still stupid. Then Aruna approached Diaz and said that his uncle was also worried about the man, but more importantly, why the girl called him father. Aruna started to get nervous and talk about how Diaz had a big child, and when he managed to have children, and who the mother was. Aisu asked Diaz who the child was, pointing at Diaz. Aruna shouted that she was Diaz's wife. Aisu was surprised and said that no matter how you look at it, the girl was younger than her, and that was illegal in the kingdom. Aruna said that she was from the Oni tribe, so she did not know the laws of the kingdom. Aisu apologized and said that she was rude to her, so she asked the girl not to be offended. Aruna said that she also apologized because she accidentally violated the norms of decency, so she apologized. Diaz tried to explain who these children were. Suddenly, Aruna's horn begins to glow. The girl turns around and looks into the distance. Suddenly, a group of invaders appears. Yugas introduces himself and says that he is disappointed in Diaz and the others. They have all this wealth, and they don't want to share it with others, so thanks to them, they have to fight again. They have killed each other too many times, so he will compromise. He orders Diaz and the others to submit to him. The strong have the right to rule the weak, and they must submit to him. Aruna replies that she doesn't understand what the man is talking about, and then uses mist magic. Hughes is surprised and says that he doesn't understand where they disappeared to. Aisu was surprised and asked if they really couldn't see them. Aruna replied that she used camouflage magic, and while there was time, they had to leave. Aisu asked if it was really camouflage magic. Aisu said that they didn't notice that they were being followed. She heard something about Hyugas. He used to be a knight of the kingdom, but after his allies betrayed him and he almost died, he became a bandit. In addition, he seems to have a strange ideology. Aruna approaches Diaz and says that he has an idea. At this time, Hyugas' assistant said that they could not find them anywhere, so they could go back. Hyugas said that it was hard to be a cowardly weakling. They should not worry. If they gave him the wealth, he would guarantee their safety. Suddenly, Diaz calls Hyugas. The man says that he is the lord of this land, so he challenges him to a one-on-one duel. Hyugas is surprised and asks why the hero who saved the country is here. Aruna was next to Diaz and told him to keep up the good work and tell them exactly what she was saying. Diaz says that if Hyugas defeats him, he will submit to the man. However, when he loses, he will submit to Diaz. He suggests that they decide who is stronger, fair, and square. Hyugas' assistant says that it is a trap. Diaz, with a confident face, asks Hyugas what is the matter, because he can leave the sword and come to him or he is afraid of Diaz. Hyugas says that he does not need the sword, and he offers Diaz to find out who is stronger. Aruna thought that Hughes was caught. Even though he was a villain, he didn't lie about what he said. You could say that he was pure, or rather he acted like a child, or just stupid. Hyugas heads towards Diaz and bids him to begin. A fierce battle ensues. Hyugas asks Diaz why he has so much power, since he is the lord of a distant land. Diaz told Hyugas that he was wrong, because no man can live alone, not even the strong. He has comrades and family, That is why you can continue to live. The strength of the strong is to protect and feed everyone. Diaz says that this is why Hugus needs to work hard too. He punches Hugus and throws him away. Hugus's assistants catch him and say that they should leave because they are not his rivals. Isu and Arai shouted that it was great and the enemies were running away. Isu said that she thought it would be, but as expected of her father. Aruna agreed and said that as expected of her husband. The girls smiled. Aruna said that they were all Diaz's family, so they needed to get along so that everyone could support Diaz. Isu agreed. Aruna answered where their mother was, because she wanted to greet her. The girl replied that their mother was not there because they were orphans. In a normal orphanage, the foster parent is called a teacher, but they call him dad as a sign of affection. Aruna says she understands. Isu asks if it wasn't dangerous for them to gather if Papa had lost. Aruna says she would have dealt with them then. If this is a contest of strength, Diaz will not lose to anyone. Arai said that for a long time, everyone loved and respected his brother. He himself was an orphan, but he lived a long life, working every day, and his brother was respected by those around him. Soon, orphans gathered under such a brother. Diaz united the efforts of these orphans. Everyone lives helping each other, created a kind of guild of mutual aid of orphans. Then the brother who became the leader, living with them at the expense of garbage, taught them to read, write, and the importance of conscientious work. Aruna said she didn't know Diaz could learn to read and write. Isu said that thanks to her brother, the pranks of orphans began to decrease and the townspeople began to trust them. Then they began to give them better work, and they were able to become decent people. This is the Diaz they love and respect as a leader, as a brother, and as a father. So they became a family, bound together by special ties. The man next to him he calls Ben. He is Diaz's older brother and a former temple minister, wise and strict. He taught him many things in childhood. One day he suddenly disappeared. Diaz heard from his parents that he died, but he did not expect that he was still alive. Ayan and Sine asked what Diaz's mom and dad were like and if they were like Diaz. Diaz replied that they were not like him. They were calm and kind. It seemed they were said to be working in the temple, doing various errands. Ben replied that it was their fault for not explaining it properly to the child, but Diaz's parents were high priests, sitting in the first and second of 5 places. They were high priests in the great temple in the east. Everyone was surprised that they were high priests of a great temple. Aruna asked Diaz what kind of temple it was. Diaz said that there would be a long explanation, so they could skip it. One day, Saint Dia came to the Holy Land with the founding king, met the gods in the Holy Land, and received a source of knowledge from his side, and also some sacred objects. Then the founding king used the knowledge and power of the sacred objects to found the country and pacify the territories of the kingdom. Saint Dia decided not to serve the king, but to build a temple. Through this temple, one can spread the knowledge of one's spiritual father. After the death of Saint Dia, temples were erected in every region of the kingdom. The priests who served in these temples work hard every day to guide the people. In addition, in the teachings of Saint Dia, there are no details at all about God, what he looks like, and what he is. There are also many teachings whose meaning and intentions are not clear to them. Ben said that great temples were erected in the royal capital and in each of the northern, southern, eastern, and western regions. They wield influence commensurate with their size. The high priests of one of them, the great temple of the east, were the parents of this fool, and also his brother and wife. Irai said that when they spoke of the great temple, was it not the stronghold of those scoundrels? Ben said he understood why Irai said that. The priests have fallen very low these days. Diaz thinks that, according to his uncle, there was an internal conflict in the temple many years before he was born. Uncle Ben decided to settle the conflict by going to the Holy Land and asking God to teach him. Entrusting the rest to Diaz's parents, he set off on a journey to the Holy Land. Then he returned to the kingdom. His brother's family and his wife were no more, and the high school of the way had also disappeared. The temple, under the influence of the new school of the way, was completely rotten. He thought that at least he would know about his brother's family, so he collected some information and finally found out where Diaz was. The only son of the high priest of the old school of the way was on the battlefield. He asks Diaz if he knew how he felt when he was told he was killing people hard. So he thought, at any cost, he'll hit that stupid head. But he has a fiancé like that and seems to be living a decent life in his own way, so Ben forgives Diaz. He saw some things on the way here that weren't so bad. The sheep, the bats, and the puppies are all part of Diaz's family. If so, then these foolish spouses were happy to return to Earth. He thinks that Aruna is having a hard time with such a fool of a husband, but he asks her to take care of him, because he relies on the girl. Aruna shakes Ben's hand and says that it is mutual. As a wife, she is glad to meet her uncle. Ben asks Aruna not to call him so distantly, because she can just address him easily. Suddenly Eric turned to Aruna and asked how Aruna dared to pretend to be his fiancé. Eric was his wife. After all, he had married her, and that was 20 years ago. Diaz asked Eric what he was talking about. Eric asked Diaz to call him Eerie. At that time, didn't Diaz tell Eerie that he would buy her a ring when she grew up? Diaz says that the conversation is about Eerie's birthday. He seems to remember telling Eerie that he would buy him the ring he liked when he grew up, because he didn't have any money at the moment. Eerie asks if that means he's proposing to her. At that point, Ben turned to Diaz and said that he was a guy. When he met him, he thought he was weird. Diaz said that he used to be a more normal boy. Aruna said that this child seems to have the shape of a female soul, so perhaps he has a female heart. Isu turned to Diaz and said that Sine and Ihan were the new little sisters. His fiancée was cute, but these kids were cute too. Eric interrupted everyone and told Diaz not to ignore him. Later, somewhere in the village, Hugas was working in the field with his comrades. He told the boys that this was an order from the strongman Diaz, so they must work conscientiously.